The asphalt still remembers. That's what I told myself the first time my tires rolled onto one of those forgotten RV highways. The kind the state maps don't bother printing anymore. The kind where the white lines are sun-bleached to ghosts and weeds press through the cracks like hands reaching from underneath. I wasn't chasing adventure so much as trying to outrun the noise of my own life. And yet, the silence out there was worse than any noise I'd left behind. It began on a late September afternoon when I took an exit that wasn't on my GPS. The sign leaned sideways, its letters faded. State Route 12B closed ahead. Something in me ignored that warning. Maybe I wanted the quiet. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that the road could still belong to me, even if the world had forgotten it. My Volkswagen hummed steady, but every curve carried me deeper into a place that didn't seem to want company. I passed no cars, no bikers, no hitchhikers. Just miles of cracked pavement bordered by cottonwoods bending inward, as if trying to keep the road hidden. I've driven lonely stretches before, but this was different. There's lonely, and then there's abandoned. Lonely is when you don't see another soul for hours. Abandoned is when you realize no soul has been here in years, and the world itself has started to erase the path humans once carved. And abandoned roads don't just disappear. They linger. They remember. About 20 miles in, I spotted the first relic of what came before, the husk of a rest stop. The picnic tables were splintered, the bathroom doors chained shut, but I swore I could smell faint traces of gasoline, as though a trucker had just topped off his tank yesterday. I parked, killed the engine, and the silence that followed pressed against me like water filling my lungs. Not just quiet, wrong quiet. No birds, no bugs. Not even the wind moving through the cottonwoods. That's when I noticed it, a row of RV hookups on the edge of the lot. Rusted, bent, useless, but still standing in perfect alignment. I imagined families who once camped there, laughter spilling out of RV windows, kids running between picnic tables. Then, like smoke, that image vanished, and all that was left was my own reflection in the van's glass, staring back too still, too pale. I should have turned around right then, but something in the stillness hooked me deeper, whispering that if I kept going, I might learn what the road was hiding. That whisper was louder than common sense. The miles stretched on. Asphalt gave way to gravel in places, as though the road was crumbling backward into the earth. I began to notice things I couldn't explain. Mile markers with numbers that didn't climb sequentially, jumping from 23 to 89, then back to 10. Old billboards along the shoulder, their paint half peeled, yet somehow the faces on them seemed to track me as I passed. At one point, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw headlights behind me. Relief hit, until I blinked, and they were gone. By dusk, the horizon burned orange. I pulled off at a wide gravel shoulder to camp for the night. The map said nothing about a campground here, but the space was too deliberate not to have been one once. A fire ring lay half buried under weeds, and when I crouched to brush away the dirt, I saw blackened stones and the char of old wood. Someone had sat here once, warming themselves against this same silence. I told myself I'd be fine. After all, I'd camped in worse places. When night came, though, the air grew heavy. Inside the van, with the curtains drawn, I thought I heard faint murmurs, like conversations overlapping, too muffled to catch words, as though people were talking just outside. I cracked the curtain. Nothing but trees and the hollow outline of the road. Yet the sound continued, weaving through the stillness until I couldn't tell whether it was outside or inside my own head. Sleep never came easy that night. Around midnight, a sharp knock rattled the side of my van. 3 strikes, deliberate. My chest locked tight. I held my breath, every muscle frozen. I wanted to believe it was branches swaying, but when I finally forced myself to peek, the trees were still. No wind. No movement. Just my own face staring back in the glass again. At dawn, the air was damp and cold, the kind of cold that doesn't come from temperature but from absence. I stepped outside and froze. In the gravel near my van were tire tracks, fresh, pressed deep, circling my vehicle as though another RV had pulled up in the night, watched, then left. But I hadn't heard an engine. Not once. I drove on, heart hammering with each mile, telling myself I'd find an intersection, a town, a way back to the present. Instead, I found more evidence of the past refusing to die. Half-sunken road signs pointing to places no longer on maps, the charred skeleton of an RV on the shoulder, its windows melted into black stains. I slowed, breath caught in my throat, staring at the outline of a family sticker still clinging to the back. 2 adults, 2 kids, a dog. Perfect and smiling. The kind of sticker you'd see on minivans in the suburbs. Except here, they smiled from the ruins of something that should not still be standing. That was when the smell hit me. Not smoke, no. Something sweet, almost chemical, like antifreeze mixed with rot. It crawled up my nostrils, set my stomach churning. I rolled up the windows, pressed on the gas, but the scent lingered, trapped in my nose as though it had burrowed inside me. And then I saw it. Another rest area. This one different. This one waiting. The sign out front read, "Welcome RV Travelers." Its paint was fresh. Too fresh. As though someone had touched it up yesterday. And in the distance, I could see shapes, trailers, motorhomes, lined in neat rows under the trees. My chest swelled with relief. Finally, others. Finally, proof that I wasn't alone out here. But as I rolled closer, the relief curdled. The RVs were still, too still. Their windows were dark, their doors sealed tight, and every one of them bore the same bumper sticker, "We never left." I stopped at the edge of the lot, unable to breathe. Something in those words felt less like a slogan and more like a warning. My hand hovered over the ignition, torn between reversing and stepping out to prove I wasn't imagining this. And that was when I saw the curtains in one of the RVs shift. Not fast, not like a breeze, but slow, intentional, as though someone or something was inside, pulling them back just enough to look at me. My foot slammed on the gas, gravel sprayed behind me. The van lurched forward, tires squealing as I tore down the forgotten highway, that row of RVs vanishing in the rearview mirror, their shadows stretching longer than they should have across the cracked asphalt. But even as distance grew, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still watching. That somehow, on these forgotten RV highways, the past hadn't just lingered. It had learned to move. And now it had noticed me. The road stretched out in front of me like an old scar that refused to heal, winding deeper into hills that seemed to fold over themselves in endless repetition. I kept glancing at the mile markers, desperate for proof that I was making progress, but they only made the fear worse. Numbers scratched out, replaced with faded paint. Some missing altogether. Others repeating, as if I'd passed the same point before. I kept telling myself the sun would guide me, that I just needed to keep driving east until I hit civilization again. But by afternoon, I realized I'd been heading into the same angle of sunlight for hours, as if the road itself had decided which way I would go. The van rattled over broken asphalt, suspension groaning, and with every mile, the sense of being unwelcome grew stronger. Not in the way wild landscapes sometimes warn you, storms rolling in, animals watching from tree lines, but in a way that felt human, intentional, like I had intruded into someone's memory and they were deciding what to do with me. I found another turnout by late afternoon. This one was stranger than the last. An old fuel station, its pumps rusted into statues, canopy half collapsed. The signs above the small store were still legible, though. Cold drinks, maps, camping supplies. The windows were gone, but the doorway yawned open, black as a tunnel. Against every survival instinct I had, I stepped inside. The air reeked of mildew and dust. My flashlight beam caught shelves warped with rot, but here and there, items remained. A plastic cup with a cartoon sun sitting perfectly upright on the counter. A rack of postcards, edges curled, but the images still bright. Greetings from Route 12B. They showed smiling families, RVs parked along the shoulder, mountains in the background that looked exactly like the ones outside now. My hands shook as I flipped through them. On the last card, someone had scrawled across the glossy surface in thick marker, "We stayed too long." That should have been enough to drive me straight back to the van, but as I turned, I heard a soft shuffle. Not the scurrying of a rodent. No, these footsteps had weight. Measured. I froze, straining to hear again. Silence. My beam swung across the room, jittering with the tremor in my wrist. Nothing. Just broken shelves and shadows too deep for the weak light to pierce. Then came the sound of breathing. Not mine. Low, damp, rasping. I backed out of the store without thinking, my flashlight trembling over the doorway until I burst into the daylight again. The instant I stepped outside, the air felt lighter, as though the presence inside couldn't follow me past the doorway. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I ran back to the van, slammed the door, and locked it twice. That night, I parked farther down the road in a wide bend overlooking a valley. My curtains drawn tight, I tried to convince myself it had all been tricks of an overworked mind. Shadows, echoes, nothing more. But around midnight, I woke to a glow outside my window. I thought maybe it was headlights. Another traveler. Finally, relief flooded me as I peeled back the curtain, only to see lanterns. Dozens of them, flickering in a line along the shoulder of the road. Figures stood by each one, still as posts, their shapes too far to make out, but unmistakably human. My throat closed. I stayed frozen at the window, watching. Not one of them moved, not one lantern swayed. They were waiting. For me. I pulled the curtain shut, crawled into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The engine coughed, hesitated, then roared to life. I flipped on my headlights and the road in front of me lay empty. No lanterns. No figures. Just cracked pavement stretching into darkness. My mind wanted to believe I had dreamed it, but the lingering smell of kerosene drifted faint in the air vents, clinging to me long after I drove away. By dawn, exhaustion dragged at me so hard my eyes stung. I told myself I'd pull over at the next safe place, no matter what. That place turned out to be an overpass. Its guardrails twisted, concrete scarred with black streaks where vehicles had once collided. Beneath it, I found something worse than silence. I found evidence. Rusted RV parts littered the weeds, bumpers, wheels, stripped frames gnawed by rust. As I stepped down into the shadow of the bridge, I saw the ground was layered in tire tracks. Not fresh, not old, just there, impossible to date. Dozens of patterns overlapping like signatures of the forgotten. My stomach clenched when I noticed the tracks didn't just end. They circled. Loops and loops, as if the drivers had gone around and around under the bridge until something stopped them. And then I saw the writing, spray paint across the concrete pillars. Don't camp here. Don't stop. I spun on my heel and sprinted back to the van, my breath ripping out of me in panicked bursts. My instincts screamed the same words, don't stop. Not here. Not anywhere along this cursed stretch. The problem was, I didn't know where it ended. As I pulled away from the overpass, I swore I saw movement in my mirrors again. Those faint headlights trailing me, blinking in and out like ghosts of vehicles that should have long been scrapped. My grip locked around the wheel. I told myself they couldn't touch me as long as I kept moving. But even as the sun rose, I knew this road wasn't letting me go so easily. Because somewhere deep down, the truth pressed cold and heavy. I wasn't just traveling on a forgotten RV highway. I was becoming part of it. The more I drove, the more the landscape betrayed me. The hills no longer seemed like hills, but like waves frozen mid-crest, rolling in directions that didn't make sense. Pines leaned unnaturally inward, their branches knotted and low as if they were conspiring to cage the road. The sky dimmed, though my watch swore it was noon. Even the sun seemed to hesitate out here, unable to pierce whatever veil hung over this place. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles whitened. The van's engine droned like a warning siren I couldn't shut off. Every mile, I expected to see the end of this forgotten stretch. An intersection, a sign, a way back, but the road kept unfolding in endless sameness, spooling out like a film reel stuck on repeat. Then, out of nowhere, I spotted movement ahead. My pulse jumped. A figure stood on the shoulder, thumb raised in the old hitchhiker's gesture. Relief hit me first. A person. Finally, someone alive out here. I slowed, heart hammering. As I drew closer, details sharpened. A man, maybe late 50s, with a sun-creased face and a battered ball cap. His duffel sat at his boots, his eyes fixed on me. But when I Met his gaze, my blood turned to ice. There was no recognition in his eyes, no spark of awareness, just a hollow vacancy, like he was waiting not for me but for anyone and had been waiting a very long time. Against every instinct, I pulled alongside. My window cracked just enough to speak. "You stranded out here?" I asked, voice rasping. He didn't answer, didn't move, just raised his hand higher, thumb still pointed skyward, eyes glassy and unblinking. That was enough. I pressed the gas. My tires spit gravel, and in the rearview mirror the man shrank into the distance. Only then did I notice his duffel was still on the ground. And yet he wasn't. He was gone, as though he'd never stood there at all. The road wound into a canyon after that, cliffs rising steep on both sides. My headlights cut tunnels of light through the gloom. At one bend, I nearly slammed the brakes. Scrawled across the canyon wall in massive black letters were the words, "We came this far and no farther." Beneath it, another phrase, smaller, almost desperate. "Turn around." I wanted to obey. God, I wanted to. But when I looked behind me, the road had changed. The asphalt I'd just driven was gone, replaced by loose gravel and weeds as if it had never been paved. My heart hammered against my ribs. There was no way back, only forward. The canyon narrowed, walls pressing in. That's when I heard it, the faint rumble of engines. Not mine. Dozens, maybe more, echoing through the canyon like a convoy approaching. Relief surged again. Other travelers. Finally. But as the sound grew louder, it became wrong. Engines revving, gears grinding, horns blaring. Yet, when I looked in the mirrors, nothing was there. No headlights, no dust. Just the roar of unseen caravans rushing closer, crowding me, until I could feel the vibration rattling the frame of the van. I screamed over the noise, begging it to stop, and as suddenly as it began, the sound vanished. Silence crashed down so hard my ears rang. My whole body trembled. My van idled alone in the canyon, engine purring weakly, like even it was afraid to make a sound. When the road finally opened into a wide plateau, I nearly sobbed in relief. My headlights stretched across flat land scattered with old campfire rings and broken picnic tables. In the center stood a weathered sign, tilted at an angle. I stepped out to read it, my legs quivering under me. "Welcome to Travelers Rest RV Park." The paint had peeled to bare wood, but the words beneath were freshly carved, scratched deep with something sharp. "You should not have come." My breath fogged in the cooling air. I turned back to the van and froze. All around me, parked in silent rows, were RVs I hadn't seen when I pulled in. Their shapes loomed in the darkness, outlines glinting faintly in the starlight. They hadn't been there a moment ago. I knew that with every nerve in my body. One by one, their porch lights flickered on, dim amber glows casting shadows across the cracked earth. And from inside those RVs, curtains shifted, shapes moved. Figures leaned against the glass, watching me with eyes I couldn't quite see. My hands shook as I stumbled back into the van. I jammed the keys into the ignition, praying it would start, praying I hadn't already stayed too long. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared alive. But before I shifted into drive, I glanced one last time into the mirrors. Every RV door was open, and the shadows inside were stepping out. I floored the accelerator, gravel spraying beneath my tires, headlights bouncing across the uneven plateau. The van fishtailed, and for a heartbeat, I thought the wheels would sink into the cracks that split the earth like veins. Behind me, I didn't dare look too long, but I caught flashes in the mirrors, those shadows spilling from the open doors, their outlines stretching unnaturally tall in the glow of the porch lights. They weren't running. They didn't need to. They only stood watching, knowing the road would carry me back to them eventually. The forgotten highway narrowed again, funneling me into a tunnel of black pines. My beams caught their trunks, smooth and too close, as though the forest itself had shifted to close the way behind me. My breath came ragged, every exhale fogging the windshield, even though the heater was off. I drove faster than was safe, bouncing over potholes, scraping low branches that clawed at the metal roof like fingernails. After what felt like hours, a flash of color broke the monotony. Another sign, leaning, rusted but legible in the headlights. Rest area ahead, 2 miles. I wanted to laugh, The idea of rest felt absurd. Still, something inside me ached for it, some primal part that longed to believe in safety, in a place built for travelers like me. When the rest area appeared, I nearly wept. A wide lot, cracked but open, bordered by trees. Picnic tables, garbage bins, a faded map posted near a bathroom shack. I pulled in and killed the engine, the silence slamming down heavy and absolute. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. The lot was empty. No RVs, no lanterns, no shadows. I stepped out cautiously, gravel crunching under my boots. The air was damp, smelling faintly of pine and something sweeter like burnt sugar. I walked toward the posted map, desperate for bearings. Maybe it would show a town, a highway spur, any sign of an escape route. The map was warped and sun-bleached, but my stomach sank as my light swept over it. The red marker dot, "You are here," was scrawled in uneven paint, dripping down the laminated surface. Worse, the highway traced across the board wasn't a highway at all. It was a loop, a perfect circle. Route 12B bent and wound, but in the end, it always fed back into itself. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. "No," I whispered, voice breaking. "That's not possible." That was when I heard the footsteps. They came from the bathroom shack, slow, deliberate, heavy against the concrete slab. I raised my flashlight, beam trembling. The door to the men's room swung open with a groan. Darkness inside, blacker than the night around it. "Hello?" My voice cracked. No answer. Only the sound of water dripping. Then, faintly, the squeal of hinges as another door opened, the women's restroom this time. A second pair of footsteps joined the first. My breath hitched. The sound of two sets of feet, dragging, shuffling, moving closer. I bolted back to the van, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands shook on the wheel. I fumbled the key, cursed, and finally jammed it in. The engine coughed, stalled, then roared alive. My headlights swept across the lot and caught them. Two figures stood side by side just beyond the restroom. Their clothes were wrong, faded travel shirts and jeans decades out of date. Their faces pale and featureless like waterlogged masks. But what froze me wasn't their appearance. It was the way they stood. Not blocking me, not chasing, just waiting. As though they knew the road itself would drive me back to them sooner or later. I spun the wheel, gravel spitting as the van lurched back onto the highway. The rest area shrank in the mirrors, the figures shrinking with it, but their presence clung to me, heavy as chains. My pulse thundered. Every instinct screamed that I wasn't just being haunted. I was being recruited. The road blurred beneath me, mile after mile, until my eyes burned with exhaustion. I should have stopped, but I couldn't. Stopping felt like surrender. Stopping felt like giving them permission. By the time the horizon lightened with the pale wash of dawn, my body was on autopilot. My hands gripped the wheel. My foot pressed the gas. And that's when I saw something impossible. Another sign, freshly painted. The letters crisp and clear. "Welcome to Travelers Rest RV Park." The same words I'd seen before. But this time, beneath them, new letters had been added. Black, bold, and sharp. "We've been waiting for you." My chest hollowed out as if the air had been sucked from my lungs. I slammed the brakes, tires screaming across the cracked pavement, the van jerking to a halt just short of the sign. I stared at it, unable to blink. The words glistened with wet paint, streaks dripping down like fresh blood. Nobody could have painted it overnight. Not in this wasteland, not without me seeing, not without an engine roaring to life. But there it was, waiting. Personal. I gripped the wheel so tightly my hands cramped, and for the first time since stepping onto this cursed highway, I realized the truth pressing down on me. I wasn't lost. I was being led. Still, I drove forward. What else was there? The asphalt groaned beneath me, each crack yawning wider, weeds clawing at my tires. The sky overhead dimmed unnaturally, clouds crawling across the light until even the morning looked like twilight. As the road bent, I found myself back in familiar ground. The plateau, the circle of RVs, their doors still open. This time, though, they weren't empty. Figures filled the doorways, shadows with bodies, indistinct yet solid enough that my headlights caught the folds of old clothing, the outlines of hollow eyes. They didn't move, didn't speak, just watched, a wall of silent witnesses. My hands shook so hard on the wheel I could barely keep it steady. I swore their heads turned in unison as I passed, following me, necks rotating slow and deliberate. I wanted to scream, but fear locked my voice in my chest. I pressed the gas harder, heart hammering as the plateau disappeared behind me. The road wound into another stretch of pines, but the silence inside the van was worse than the shadows I'd just fled. Hours slipped into one another. My body ached, my eyes stung, and then, as if mocking me, I saw it again. Travelers Rest RV Park. Same sign, same lettering, same impossible loop. I pounded the steering wheel with my fists, shouting curses into the stale air. My voice cracked, rage breaking into sobs. "Let me out! I don't belong here! I don't belong!" But the highway didn't care. This time, the park wasn't empty. Lanterns glowed in rows along the lot. Smoke curled from chimneys that shouldn't have worked. I slowed despite myself, a magnetic pull dragging me toward the heart of it. My headlights caught faces through windows. Families, couples, old men and women, sitting at tables, their hands folded, staring out at me, not smiling, not frowning, just waiting. A voice whispered inside the cab of the van, low and breathless, though I was alone. "You've driven far enough. Stop fighting. You're one of us now." My skin crawled, every hair standing on end. I whipped my head around, but no one was there. The van's interior was empty, just me and my pounding heart, yet the words clung to the air, vibrating in my bones. I pressed the accelerator, refusing to stop, refusing to join them. Gravel crunched under my tires as I tore past the rows of glowing RVs. My headlights flared across faces pressed to windows, their mouths moving in silence, forming words I couldn't hear. I didn't want to hear. The forest swallowed me again, the black pines knitting together overhead. My body trembled, exhaustion gnawing at my edges, but fear drove me harder than sleep ever could. That was when I noticed the gas gauge. It had been full when I left town. Now the needle hovered just above empty. My stomach dropped. I hadn't driven far enough to drain a tank, not even close. But here, on this forgotten highway, time and fuel seemed to bleed away faster than reason could explain. Panic clawed at me. I scanned the shoulder, desperate for any sign of escape. And that's when I saw the glow ahead. Brighter than lanterns, sharper than headlights. A gas station. Its neon sign flickered faintly. Fuel. Rest. Stay. I didn't want to stop. God, I didn't. But the gauge dipped lower, the van coughing, sputtering, threatening to die on me. My choices shrank to none. I coasted into the lot, gravel crunching on under bald tires. The pumps stood tall, too pristine for this place, their hoses gleaming like they'd been polished yesterday. My headlights illuminated the store beyond, windows lit, door propped open, a faint warm glow spilling onto the cracked pavement. For a moment, hope stirred. Maybe, finally, something normal. Then I noticed the people. A family of 4, standing by the pumps. Their RV sat parked nearby, chrome shining like it had just rolled off a dealer's lot. The father smiled, raising a hand in greeting. The mother's eyes gleamed in the light. The children clutched toys too clean, too bright, as if untouched by time. Relief and terror tangled in my chest. My instincts screamed to turn around, but my engine sputtered one final time, choking out, dying. Silence swallowed the lot. And in that silence, the family still smiled. Not moving. Not blinking, just smiling as if they'd been smiling here forever. My hand hovered over the ignition, twisting the key again and again, praying for the van to roar back to life. All I got was a hollow cough, a pathetic whine, then nothing. Dead. The silence pressed in, heavy as lead, broken only by the faint hum of the neon sign buzzing overhead. Fuel. Rest. Stay. The family by the pump hadn't moved. The father's hand was still raised in greeting, frozen in the exact same angle. The mother's smile was stretched too wide, her teeth small and perfect, gleaming in the glow. The kids clutched their toys with white-knuckled grip, their faces masks of joy that didn't reach their eyes. I forced myself to breathe, every inhale burning in my lungs. "Hey," I called, my voice cracking. Do you have gas? I'll pay." Nothing, not a flinch, not a blink. Something inside me snapped. I shoved the door open and stepped onto the gravel, the crunch echoing unnaturally loud. My legs trembled, but I forced them to move, one step at a time toward the pumps. The air smelled wrong here, sweet and chemical, sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. As I got closer, the details sharpened. The father's skin looked waxy, too smooth, as if polished. The children's toys, plastic dinosaurs, a bright red truck, weren't scuffed or scratched. They looked new, untouched, yet coated in a fine layer of dust. I stopped a few feet away, heart pounding so hard it drowned out the neon hum. "Please," I whispered. "I just need gas. Just help me leave." The father's head tilted, slow and unnatural, like a mannequin being adjusted. His smile never faltered, but his eyes fixed on mine, hollow and bottomless. Then, in perfect unison, the rest of the family turned their heads toward me. Every vertebra in my spine iced over. "Stay," they said together. 4 voices, layered and flat, as if spoken through the same mouth. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the gravel. My flashlight beam quivered across their still forms, catching the faint gleam of something carved into the pump beside them. Words scratched deep into the metal. "We're all still here." I bolted back to the van, yanking the door shut, locking it twice, though I knew it wouldn't matter. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, praying for the impossible. The engine was dead, the tank bone dry, but I twisted the key anyway. The dashboard flickered. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then, roar. The van shook to life. Relief nearly broke me in half. I threw it into gear, wheels screaming as I tore out of the lot, the figures shrinking in my mirrors. But they weren't still anymore. The family moved. Slow, deliberate, stepping into the road behind me, watching as I fled. The father's hand still raised, the children clutching their toys, the mother's grin carved wider than any human face should allow. The highway swallowed me again, black and endless. My hands gripped the wheel in a deathlock, sweat pouring down my temples. My gas gauge still read empty, yet the van barreled forward, engine humming strong as if fueled by something other than gasoline. The air inside grew colder, heavy with the smell of kerosene and rot. My headlights swept across mile markers that no longer made sense, scratched out numbers, symbols I didn't recognize, spirals that made my stomach twist when I looked too long. And then I saw them. Dozens of RVs lining the road on both sides, some gleaming, some rusted husks, others burned black. Families sat inside, staring through windows. Travelers stood outside with their arms raised in welcome, their faces lit by lanterns that didn't flicker. Every one of them watching me, every one of them smiling that same carved smile. I pressed harder on the accelerator, but the van resisted, slowing as if the road itself had thickened beneath my tires. The faces blurred past in my peripheral vision, yet I felt their eyes tracking me. My breath came ragged, tears stinging as I realized the truth pressing into my skull like a nail. This highway wasn't a road, it was a trap, a loop that gathered travelers, feeding on them, folding them into its endless cycle, and I was already too deep inside. Ahead a sign loomed out of the dark, the same words, crisp and new, Travelers Rest RV Park. But this time, beneath it, a final line had been carved into the wood, the letters deep and ragged, "Welcome home." The word home clung to me like a curse. I gripped the wheel so tightly the leather cut into my palms, blood rising beneath the skin. My body screamed to stop, to turn around, to do anything but drive through those gates again. But I didn't turn. I couldn't. The van carried itself forward, as though my will no longer mattered. The RV park unfolded before me, brighter now than ever. Every porch light glowed, every lantern blazed. Smoke curled from chimneys in perfect spirals that rose but never dispersed, as though the sky itself refused to swallow them. Rows of RVs lined the gravel drives, each door standing open in silent invitation. And they were all waiting. Figures filled the spaces, families in lawn chairs, couples standing arm in arm, children holding bikes that gleamed as if they'd never touched dirt. Every head turned in unison as I rolled in, their smiles carved across their faces like scars. Not welcoming, not threatening, just inevitable. My breath came shallow, heart hammering. I wanted to believe I could turn the van around, throw it into reverse, tear back into the night. But the rearview mirror showed only darkness. No road, no forest, just a wall of black. The van shuddered to a stop. I hadn't touched the brake. The engine cut out, silence slamming down like a coffin lid. My chest tightened, every nerve in my body screaming to move, to fight, to run. But my limbs wouldn't obey. It was as if the air itself pressed me into stillness. Then the voices began. Low at first, a murmur threading through the park, rising from a dozen throats, then 100. Words I couldn't make out at first, swirling like static. I strained to listen, every hair on my body lifting as the sound coalesced into a single phrase, repeated again and again in perfect rhythm. We never left. We never left. We never left. The chorus filled the night, an ocean of voices, overlapping until they rattled the van's windows, until the metal frame vibrated like a struck bell. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The words weren't just outside. They were inside, spilling into my skull, sinking into the cracks of my mind. We never left. My vision blurred. The faces outside shifted, no longer strangers. They became familiar, faces I'd seen in rest stops, in gas stations, in old photographs of travelers on highways long gone. Their features melted, then reformed, until I swore I saw people I knew. My father, my old camping buddy, a girl I'd met years ago in Utah, who swore she'd never camp again after one terrifying night. All of them here. All of them smiling that same carved smile. No, I whispered, my voice shaking. You're not real. You're not them. The chanting grew louder, the words pounding in time with my heartbeat. The door locks clicked on their own, releasing. The handle rattled once, twice, my breath caught, every muscle locking. Slowly the door creaked open. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream, but my body betrayed me. My legs moved, stiff and trembling, carrying me down onto the gravel. The air was thick with smoke and the sweet chemical stench that had haunted me since the beginning. My head swam, the chanting folding tighter, until I could hardly tell whether the voices were theirs or mine. Figures approached, not fast, not threatening, just steady, certain, as though the outcome had already been written. Their eyes gleamed in the lantern light, their mouths moving in unison. We never left. I stumbled backward, chest heaving, my hands clawing the air for something, anything that felt real. My foot caught on the cracked edge of the pavement. I fell hard, gravel biting into my palms. Above me, their silhouettes loomed, endless rows of faces, endless echoes of the same truth. And then, in the sea of voices, one rose above the rest. Low. Familiar. You don't have to fight it anymore. My stomach lurched. That voice, I knew it. It was mine. I jerked my head around. Across the lot, standing in the open doorway of a pristine RV, I saw him. Me. Same face, same clothes, same scar above the eyebrow from a camping accident years ago. He raised a hand, not in greeting, but in summons. That his smile calm and final. The others quieted. The smoke thickened. And in the silence, he spoke again, my own voice echoing back at me. You've been driving in circles long enough. It's time to come home. My double stood there in the lantern glow, his outline sharp against the backdrop of endless RVs. My breath came in shallow bursts, every exhale trembling, as if my lungs were rejecting the air itself. I couldn't move, couldn't blink, caught in the terrible recognition that the figure beckoning me forward wasn't some trick. It was me. Or at least a version of me this place had been shaping, patiently waiting for me to arrive. He stepped down from the RV, boots crunching on gravel in rhythm with my heartbeat. Each footfall echoed in my chest as if we were connected by more than resemblance. The crowd of travelers parted for him, their smiles stretching wider, their eyes following me with an unspoken command. Join him. Finish the loop. No, I rasped, my throat raw. You're not me. But my double tilted his head, calm and confident, as though he'd heard the denial 1,000 times before. You've been running from this road since the first mile marker, he said. His voice was steady, resonant, too familiar. It was the way I spoke to myself in moments of fear, when I tried to pretend I wasn't afraid. But every mile only leads you back here. Every turn is a circle. Every exit is an entrance. You knew this. I shook my head violently, gravel cutting into my palms as I scrambled to my feet. The figures closed in behind me, silent now, forming a ring. There was no way out. I was cornered against the van, the only thing tethering me to the life I remembered. You don't belong to the outside anymore, he continued, stopping just feet from me. His smile was faint, patient, the way you might reassure a frightened child. The world forgot these highways, but they didn't forget you. They've been waiting. And now, so have I. I lunged for the van door, flinging it open. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine coughed, stuttered, nearly died. My double leaned closer, one hand pressing flat against the glass. His eyes locked on mine, and I felt the weight of his words burrow deep. You can drive until the sun burns out, he whispered, but the road will always lead you back. You are already one of us. The only choice left is whether you accept it now or later. The engine roared. My headlights flared to life, cutting across the endless circle of RVs, their faces still frozen in their carved smiles. My heart hammered as I slammed the gearshift into drive. Gravel exploded under the tires as the van lurched forward, forcing me through the human wall. They didn't resist, didn't reach out. They simply parted, letting me pass, their gazes heavy on my back. My double stood at the center of the lot, watching me go, his silhouette fading in the mirror until I couldn't tell if he'd been real at all. The highway swallowed me again, black and endless. Mile markers flickered past, wrong numbers, spirals, broken signs. My fuel gauge still read empty, yet the van surged on as though powered by something far older than gasoline. My hands locked on the wheel, eyes burning with exhaustion, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Hours or days blurred together. Every time I thought I'd escape, the road folded back on itself. Every time I saw the horizon break, it closed again like a clenched fist. And now, as I tell you this, I see the glow ahead once more. Lanterns, porch lights, a tilted sign with words I no longer need to read. Travelers Rest RV Park. I don't know how long I've been driving. I don't know if anyone will ever hear this. All I know is that the road won't let me go. It remembers me, as it remembers all who wander too far down forgotten highways. If you ever see a faded sign for a closed route, if your GPS shows a road that shouldn't exist, don't take it. Don't listen to the silence. Don't follow the whisper that tells you to keep going, because once you're here, you never truly leave. I never thought sound could feel heavier than silence, but that's exactly how it was the night I pulled my RV into that forgotten campground on the edge of southern Colorado. The place didn't even have an official name, at least not one marked on the maps. Just a cracked wooden sign that leaned crooked near the entrance, faded lettering half swallowed by moss. It looked like it had been abandoned long before I was born, and yet, for some reason I can't fully explain, I felt drawn to it. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way the trees bent around the dirt road like they were hiding something. Either way, I turned in. I was 34 then, restless in a way that drove me out onto the road more often than it should have. My name's Daniel, though in that campground I remember feeling like my own name didn't quite belong to me, like it was something I borrowed, something fragile. I had been driving for hours through empty stretches of highway, the kind that make you feel like you've slipped through some crack in the world where time doesn't matter. I just wanted a place to stop, sleep, maybe cook some food. Nothing more complicated than that. The first thing I noticed about the campground was how wrong the quiet was. Not peaceful, wrong. The trees loomed like a frozen sea of black-green, and not a single insect sang. Not one bird chirped. Not one cricket scratched out its rhythm. It was as though the forest had pulled a blanket over its head and held its breath. I parked my RV near the far end, next to what used to be a communal fire pit, the stones scattered and covered in ash, long cooled. The air smelled faintly of wet iron, like rust after rain, though the sky was clear. I tried to ignore it. Inside, I went about the little routines that always grounded me. Fold out the table, light the small lantern, pull out a can of chili, my rituals of solitude. And yet, every movement felt too loud. The clank of the can opener, the scrape of the spoon against the pan, it all seemed to echo. Not inside the RV, but outside, like the walls were made of skin too thin to contain the sound, and something just beyond the windows was repeating them back. Delayed, distorted. At first, I thought it was in my head. Fatigue playing tricks. Long drives do that. Your ears ring, your thoughts drift. But then, when I set the spoon down on the counter, I swear I heard it. A soft clatter outside, a beat too late, like the forest was mocking me. I froze. My breath caught halfway in my chest. I told myself it had to be an animal, a raccoon maybe, knocking against a rock. But the timing was wrong. I shook it off, sat down, forced myself to eat. Food makes fear smaller sometimes, but each bite I chewed, I heard it mirrored, faintly, out there in the trees. I didn't finish. The chili went cold. I turned off the lantern, letting the dark close in. Sometimes I convince myself that if I can't see, nothing can see me. I lay on the RV's small bed, hands folded against my chest, waiting for exhaustion to finally win. That's when it came. A knock. Not on the door, on the side of the RV. Light, polite almost, like someone testing to see if I was awake. I didn't move. My skin tightened over my bones. I counted seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3, then another knock. Same place, same rhythm. I should have called out, asked who was there, but something deep in me, something older than logic, told me not to speak, to stay still. And yet, despite the pounding in my chest, despite the cold sweat collecting at the back of my neck, I leaned slowly toward the window. The curtain was thin. All I had to do was pull it aside an inch, just 1 inch. The moonlight caught on the clearing outside, painting the grass in silver streaks. Empty, no footsteps in the dirt, no shadows, nothing. But then, a third knock. Only this time, it didn't come from the side of the RV. It came from behind me, inside. I whipped around so fast, the curtain snapped against the glass. My eyes darted across the dim space, table, stove, narrow walkway. Empty. But I knew what I'd heard. The sound had come from inside the walls, like the echo had finally stepped across the boundary. My pulse hammered so loud I thought it might shake the whole rig apart. I grabbed the flashlight I kept beside the bed and switched it on, sweeping the beam through every corner. Nothing but my own belongings staring back at me, mute and harmless. I told myself I was imagining it. That exhaustion had twisted the sounds, that my nerves were stringing me along like some cruel violin. And maybe I could have believed that. Maybe I could have swallowed it, if not for what came next. A voice. Low. Close. Almost tender. It whispered my name. Not from outside. Not from the walls. From the air right in front of me. Daniel. I don't remember standing. I just remember the flashlight shaking in my hand so badly the beam fractured across the ceiling. My throat locked. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a ragged breath. And then, silence again. I didn't sleep. I sat there, back against the RV door, flashlight aimed at nothing, until the gray of dawn seeped into the windows. When I finally stepped outside, I half expected to find tracks, or maybe some sign I wasn't alone. But the ground was untouched. Even the dew was unbroken. It was as if no living thing had crossed through in years. And yet, when I looked back at my RV, I saw it clear as day. Handprints. Not on the glass, but on the metal siding, smeared faintly in condensation. Too large for me, too high for me, and every single one pointed inward. I stood there, my breath hanging in the cool morning air, staring at those prints like they were waiting for me to admit something. They weren't smudges from a curious camper or stains from the road. They were deliberate, like someone or something had pressed its palms flat against the walls of my home and leaned in, as if listening. I wanted to rub them away. That was my first instinct, to erase them, to make them belong to nothing. But my hand refused to lift. Some part of me believed that touching them would let whatever had left them know that I'd noticed, that I'd acknowledged it. That's the thing about fear. It's not just what you see, it's the story you think it wants you to believe. I pulled the RV door shut behind me and locked it, though the thin metal latch felt like a joke. My eyes kept flicking to the tree line, expecting something pale and tall to step out and show itself. Nothing did. The forest stayed frozen, as if holding back its secret. I told myself I'd leave. That's what any sane person would do, right? fire up the engine back onto the highway and drive until gas stations and streetlights and other people filled the horizon. But I didn't. Something held me there. Maybe it was pride, my stubbornness, my refusal to admit how shaken I was. Maybe it was curiosity, the kind that makes you slow down when you pass a wreck on the side of the road. Or maybe it was something quieter, a pull I couldn't name. So I stayed. I spent the day outside, moving slowly, trying to act like the place was just another stop along the way. I unrolled my folding chair, brewed coffee on the little stove, even took out a book I'd been meaning to read. I didn't flip a single page. My eyes stayed fixed on the trees. Hours passed, shadows shifting across the clearing. The stillness pressed heavier as the sun dipped lower. It wasn't until dusk that I realized how badly I'd boxed myself in, because when the dark came again, I knew I wouldn't trust myself to stay inside. Not with the echo waiting there. That's when I met her. She appeared without sound, stepping out from the path at the far edge of the campground. A woman, maybe in her late 40s, hair braided down her back, wearing a flannel shirt faded with years of use. She carried no gear, no pack, just a small lantern in her hand. I nearly jumped out of my chair. She raised her free hand, palm out, the way you'd calm a skittish dog. "Sorry," she said, her voice steady but low. "Didn't mean to startle you." For a moment, relief surged through me. Another person. Proof that I wasn't unraveling. "No, it's fine," I managed. "Just didn't expect anyone else out here." She gave a half smile. Not warm, not cold. Measured. Not many do. She walked closer, but not too close, stopping a good 20 feet away. The lantern light caught her face, lined but strong, her eyes sharp in a way that unsettled me. "You staying the night?" she asked. I hesitated. That was the plan. She tilted her head, studying me as though weighing something. "Careful where you sleep." The words lodged in my gut. I forced a laugh, thin and awkward. "Why's that?" Her gaze drifted toward my RV, then to the trees. "This place, it carries things, echoes. Best to move on before they find your name." I felt my skin prickle. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. She just turned, lantern swinging, and walked back the way she'd come. I wanted to call after her to demand an explanation, but the words stuck. Something about her silence told me I didn't want to know. When her light vanished between the trees, I was left with the sinking realization that she hadn't said her name, and I hadn't offered mine. That night, I made the mistake of staying awake too long. I kept the lantern burning inside the RV, the flame small and steady, my eyes heavy but refusing to close. The forest pressed against the windows like an audience waiting for its cue. Midnight came. My hands shook as I checked the time. Every minute stretched into something unbearable, and then it started again. The echo. Not a knock this time, but something worse. Breathing. At first faint, like a draft through the vents. Then louder, steadier, matching the rhythm of my own chest. It filled the narrow space, not coming from outside, not inside, but between. I clamped my mouth shut, holding my breath to prove it wasn't me. The sound didn't stop. It kept going, deliberate, patient. And then it shifted. The breathing became a whisper, not words, just sounds, broken syllables that brushed against the edges of language. It circled the RV, sliding from one wall to the next until it felt like I was trapped inside someone else's lungs. I pressed my hands against my ears, rocking back against the wall. It didn't help. The sound wasn't outside, it was inside my bones. When it finally stopped, the silence roared. I must have blacked out because the next thing I knew, pale light seeped through the curtains. My body ached, my throat raw like I'd been screaming, though I remembered no sound leaving me. I stumbled outside, desperate for air, and that's when I saw her again. The woman. She was standing at the edge of the clearing, her lantern unlit this time, her face harder, less human somehow. "You heard it," she said, not a question, a statement. I swallowed hard, my voice thin. "What is it?" Her eyes softened, not with kindness, but pity. "It's not yours. That's all you need to understand. Whatever it repeats, whatever it wears, it doesn't belong to you." I took a step toward her. "Then why is it here? Why me?" She shook her head slowly. "Not just you. Anyone who listens too long." And then, before I could ask anything more, she turned again, vanishing into the trees as if the forest itself swallowed her whole. I didn't follow. I couldn't. My legs felt nailed to the dirt, but her words stayed with me, wrapping tighter than the silence. Not yours, not mine. The echo didn't belong to me, yet somehow it had already learned my name. I thought about leaving again. I really did. I even packed up some things that morning, folded my chair, shoved the cold skillet into the drawer, started the RV to let the engine warm. The rumble felt like a lifeline, something real, something mine. But when I put my hand on the gear shift, I froze. It was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, but there in the background, beneath the low thrum of the engine, I heard it. A second hum, just half a beat behind. An echo, not from the machine, from me. I shut the engine off so fast the keys nearly snapped in the ignition. My chest heaved, panic threatening to burst out in shouts, but the forest didn't react. It just held me in place, the way a snake waits for its prey to stop fighting. I sat there for a long time, fingers clamped tight around the steering wheel. I thought of the woman, how she'd warned me without warning me. Careful where you sleep. Echoes. Best to move on before they find your name. But she hadn't said how. She hadn't told me what leaving would do. What if this thing, whatever it was, had already taken root? What if the echo didn't live here, but in me now? That thought pinned me to the seat more firmly than any fear of the woods. By afternoon, the air grew heavy, thick with the smell of wet stone. There hadn't been rain, Mustad, yet the scent was undeniable. Like the campground itself had been soaking underground, letting its damp breath seep upward. Every time I stepped outside, it clung to my skin, sour and metallic. I tried to distract myself. I pulled out a map, traced my finger across state lines, thought about where I'd go next. Utah, maybe. Arizona. Places with wide skies and space that swallowed echoes instead of feeding them. But no matter where my eyes wandered, I kept hearing it. My own movements doubled. If I dropped a fork on the table, a second clink followed. If I zipped my jacket, another zipper hissed in response, just a fraction too late. It grew bolder at dusk. I was leaning against the RV door, staring at the tree line when it happened. A sound that didn't belong to me. Daniel. The voice was mine. Not close, not whispered like before. This came from the clearing, from the trees, shouted with my tone, my cadence. I felt my own voice thrown back at me. Hollow. Wrong. Daniel. I staggered back a step, bile rising in my throat. The echo had learned more than my breath. It was me. I scanned the clearing, heart hammering, but nothing moved. Only the sway of branches, only the fading light. And then another sound, a laugh. Short, broken, like someone trying out the shape of joy but not quite fitting into it. My laugh. I stumbled inside, slammed the RV door, locked it. My reflection in the small mirror above the sink caught my eye, and I couldn't look at it. For the first time in my life, I didn't trust my own face. Night came fast, crushing the last glow from the sky. I kept every light on inside, refusing to give shadows a foothold. My hands trembled as I cooked, the knife slipping against the cutting board, carrots scattering across the counter, and then I heard it again, the sound of chopping from outside, perfectly matched. I dropped the knife, heart slamming, my ears strained, desperate to prove it wrong. But no, the rhythm was exact. Each motion I made, a twin answered. I grabbed the lantern, opened the door, and stepped out into the clearing. My voice cracked as I shouted, "Who's out there?" Silence, but then faintly, from deep among the trees, came the sound of my knife against the board. Clack, clack, clack. I felt something inside me unravel. I wanted to scream again, but fear glued my jaw shut. I backed into the RV, slammed the door, and sat with my head in my hands. The woman's warning played over and over. Not yours. Not yours. But if it wasn't mine, why did it know me so well? I must have drifted into some half-sleep, because I woke to the sound of footsteps circling the RV. Slow, deliberate, crunching the dirt like a predator savoring the prowl. I held my breath, every nerve taut, waiting for the knock to come again. But it didn't. Instead, it called out, "Let me in." My voice. I clutched the flashlight, flicking it on, its beam jittering across the small space. The voice came again, firmer this time. Daniel, let me in. Every instinct screamed to answer, to shout back, to prove I was still the original. But something colder inside me knew that acknowledging it meant losing. So I stayed silent. The footsteps circled once more, then stopped beneath the window by my bed. I could feel the weight of presence pressing against the thin glass I had, like it was leaning in, grinning at my silence. And then it whispered, not my name, not words, just a sound that shouldn't have belonged to me at all. A sob, deep, broken, raw, my sob. It went on for minutes, dragging me through a grief I hadn't felt in years. A grief I thought I'd buried, the night my father died, the helplessness I carried, the way I'd cried in secret, ashamed. The echo hadn't just stolen my voice, it had stolen something deeper, memory. I don't know when it stopped. I just know I woke at dawn, the sobs still ringing in my head, and when I opened the curtain, the clearing was empty again. But the dirt outside my RV told another story. Footprints. Dozens of them. All mine. I crouched low, staring at the ground like the dirt itself had betrayed me. The prints were unmistakable. My boots, the same tread worn smooth near the heel. They trailed in circles around the RV, looping back on themselves, weaving in and out of the clearing as though I had been pacing in the dark all night. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. The sight made my stomach twist so violently I thought I might throw up. I pressed my hand to the earth, tracing the indentation of one print with my finger. It was perfect. Not smudged, not warped, as though I had stood there in the flesh, body and weight pressed down. The sun was barely up, but I couldn't stand being near the RV anymore. I grabbed my pack and walked into the trees, no path in mind, just the need to put distance between me and whatever version of myself had been pacing while I slept. The forest was alive in a way it hadn't been before. A breeze stirred the branches overhead, the occasional raven croaked, even a squirrel darted across my path. It should have been a comfort. Instead, it felt staged, as though the world had decided to put its mask back on after I'd seen too much. After half an hour, I stumbled on a creek. The water was shallow, clear, sliding over smooth stones. I crouched down, cupping my hands to drink, desperate to taste something untouched. The cold bit into my palms, sharp and real. Then I heard it. The splash of water. Not mine. I froze, droplets running down my wrists. Slowly, I turned my head. Across the creek, just a few feet away, the surface rippled with the shape of hands that weren't there. Fingers pressed into the current, scooping, mimicking me. I staggered back, slipped, landed hard on the bank. My heart pounded as the ripples faded, leaving the stream smooth again. It was following me, even here. I scrambled up and pushed deeper into the forest, branches slapping my arms, sweat mixing with the dirt on my skin. I wanted to scream, but the fear of hearing my own scream echoed back louder stopped me cold. By the time I made it back to the RV, the sun was high. My chest ached, my throat raw, though I hadn't spoken a word. The RV sat waiting, metal sides glinting dully. For a second, I hated it. Hated the way its walls had failed to keep anything out. Hated how small it made me feel. But it was all I had. Inside, I sat on the bed, elbows on my knees, head in my hands. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to sort through what was happening. But the more I thought, the less the line between me and the echo made sense. Because if it wasn't mine, if it didn't belong to me, then why did it feel so perfectly tailored? Why did it know my voice, my grief, my memories? Unless I was the one who didn't belong. That thought chilled me deeper than anything else. The sun dropped behind the trees faster than I was ready for, dragging the weight of night over the clearing. I didn't want to light the lantern, didn't want to give it shadows to play with, but darkness without light was worse. The first sound came just after midnight. Not a knock, not a whisper. A conversation. At first I thought it was the woman's voice. Low, calm, threading through the walls, but then I realized it wasn't just one voice, it was two. Me and her, talking. My body went rigid. The words were indistinct at first, just tones, rhythms, but slowly they sharpened, the way memory sharpens when you least want it to. Her, careful where you sleep. Me, why's that? Her, echoes. Best to move on before they find your name. The exchange we'd had 2 nights before, replayed, clear as if it were happening now, except my voice didn't stop where it had before. This time, my echo answered differently. What if I want them to find me? The breath caught in my throat. My skin prickled, goose flesh racing down my arms. I pressed my hands against my ears, but it didn't help. The sound lived inside me. Her voice laughed then. Not the woman's real laugh, but something cracked, stretched, like it had been pulled out of a throat that wasn't hers anymore. I stumbled for the door, ready to fling it open and run, but I froze with my hand on the latch. Because what if the me outside was the real one? What if this version, this trembling man clutching the RV's lock, was the echo, trapped in the wrong place? I slid down against the door, shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight. My thoughts spiraled, impossible to catch, each one spinning darker than the last. The conversation outside faded. Silence pooled in, heavier than before. And then, from directly behind me, inches from my ear, came the whisper, "Let me back in." Not let me in. Let me back in. I snapped. I don't even remember making the choice, but suddenly I was on my feet, flinging the door wide, light spilling into the clearing. Empty. The night air was sharp, clean, the trees standing still, no one there, nothing waiting. And yet, the RV behind me felt smaller now, as though I'd opened something I couldn't close. I stayed outside until the first bird call broke the night, the sky softening from black to gray. My body ached, my eyes burned, but I didn't dare sleep. When I finally stepped back into the RV, I froze, because the mirror above the sink was cracked, and in the split glass, I didn't just see myself. I saw myself twice, both reflections breathing, both lips parting, but only one of them moving with me. I backed away from the mirror so fast I hit the counter behind me. The cracked glass split my reflection in two, one half jagged, distorted, and yet, God help me, I swear it blinked a fraction later than I did. A half beat off, like every sound I'd been hearing. My chest seized, my breath shallow. I wanted to smash the mirror, but I couldn't bring myself to lift a hand. What if breaking it freed something worse? What if the crack wasn't damage, but a doorway? I pulled the curtain over it instead, shoving the fabric up as though I could smother the sight. The RV felt claustrophobic now, airless, walls pressing in. I needed out, needed sky, even if it meant facing whatever waited in the trees. The morning was colder than it should have been for that season. My breath came in clouds, mist curling upward and dissolving into the pale light. The clearing looked almost peaceful, as though the night had been nothing more than a bad dream. But the dirt told another story. More footprints. Not just circling now, approaching. Lines of my boot prints led from the tree line straight to the RV door, pressed deep into the soil like whoever left them had been standing there a long time, waiting for me to step out. I followed them with my eyes, heart hammering, and for the first time I realized how much they looked like a trail. Not random pacing, not circles. A path, one that disappeared into the woods. I told myself I wouldn't follow it, that I'd finally had enough, that I'd get in the RV and drive until the gas ran dry. But when I turned toward the rig, keys in hand, I froze, because from inside, muffled but clear, I heard the engine start. My engine. The headlights flicked on, beams slicing across the clearing. My breath caught. I stumbled backwards, staring as the RV idled, rumbling steady and alive. But I wasn't inside. I dropped the keys in the dirt. My whole body went rigid, waiting for something, someone to step into view behind the wheel. No one did. The driver's seat sat empty, and yet the RV hummed, its lights glaring like eyes fixed on me. Then the passenger side window rolled down, smooth, deliberate. And from the dark interior I heard it. My voice. Get in. The words were flat, hollow, but undeniably mine. I shook my head hard, legs trembling. No, I whispered, though the sound barely left my throat. The headlights brightened, the engine revved. Again the voice called out. Get in. I turned and ran. I don't know how far or how long. Branches tore at my clothes, the ground rose and fell beneath me, breath tearing from my lungs, but I didn't stop until the sound of the engine faded behind me. When I finally collapsed, I was on my knees in a grove I didn't recognize. The trees bent inward, their trunks twisted as though grown in pain. The air felt thick, stale, carrying no birdsong, no life. And then, in the silence, came the sound of footsteps. Not behind me, not ahead, all around, dozens of them. Every footfall matched my own boots. I spun, searching, but the grove stayed empty. My heart pounded so loud it drowned everything else. I tried to run again, but the ground beneath me shifted, soft as ash, and my legs sank halfway to the knee. I clawed my way out, scrambling toward the edge of the grove, and that's when I saw her. The woman. Standing between two bent trunks, her lantern lit once more. She didn't move, just stared at me, her expression unreadable. I staggered toward her, my voice breaking. What is happening to me? Her head tilted, and in that moment I couldn't tell if she was pitying me or studying me like some strange specimen. It's already inside, she said softly. You opened the door. I shook my head violently. I never let it in. Her eyes flicked past me toward the grove. Then why are there two of you now? The words hit like ice water. I turned, throat closing, and there, just a few yards away, stood myself. Same jacket, same boots, same dirt smeared across my face, but his chest rose a second later than mine. His head tilted at an angle I never would, and when he smiled, it was with my mouth, but too wide, too sharp, like the skin didn't fit right. I stumbled back, nearly colliding with the woman. What is it? I begged, my voice cracking. Her grip clamped down on my shoulder, firm, grounding. Not yours, she said again, the same words she'd given me that first night. But this time her tone was different. Final. The echo raised a hand, mirroring mine, but the movement lagged, twitching. Then it spoke. Daniel. My name, dragged through my own voice like gravel. I wanted to run, to hide, to claw my way out of this place, but the woman's hand held me steady. You have to choose, she said. My chest tightened. Choose what? Her grip tightened. Which one of you leaves here? The grove fell silent then, nothing but my own ragged breaths. And across from me, the echo tilted its head, waiting, smiling with my stolen face. The words hung between us like a noose. Which one of you leaves here? I couldn't breathe. My chest felt crushed, like the trees themselves were leaning down, waiting for me to decide. Across the grove, my double just stood there, smiling that broken smile. His eyes, my eyes, were fixed on me, unblinking, like a predator that knew the end of the hunt was already written. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. What do you say to yourself when yourself isn't you anymore? The woman didn't move, didn't loosen her grip on my shoulder. She was waiting, not to save me, but to see what I would do. Her silence was worse than any threat. The echo finally shifted, stepping forward. The sound of its boots against the ashen soil came a half-second too late, the noise lagging behind the motion, and yet the ground still sank beneath its weight. It was real, real enough. And then it spoke again. You're tired, Daniel. My stomach clenched. The voice was perfect now. Not gravelly, not broken, just mine. You don't want to keep running. I shook my head, but I couldn't force words past the knot in my throat. The echo's grin softened into something terrifyingly familiar. It was the smile I'd seen in photos, the one I used to wear years ago before life had worn me down. I can take it from here, it said. I stumbled back, tearing free from the woman's grip. No, you're not me. The echo tilted its head, and for the first time its movements lined up perfectly with mine. Then who are you? The question split something inside me. For weeks, months, years, I'd been drifting from place to place, parking my RV in empty lots and forgotten campgrounds, convincing myself I was free, that I was choosing this life. But in that moment, with my echo staring at me, I felt it. The hollow truth. I wasn't free. I was running from jobs I'd quit, from relationships I'd failed, from the weight of silence when there was no one left to talk to, and the echo knew it. It fed on it. The woman's voice cut through my spiral. It only lives where there's space for it, where you've left yourself empty. The echo's smile widened. And you're nothing but empty, aren't you, Daniel? My knees buckled. I wanted to deny it, scream it wasn't true. But the words wouldn't come. The echo stepped closer. With every footfall, the grove warped, trees bending inward, the soil groaning beneath us. The air tasted of iron, thick and sharp. "Let me back in," it whispered, and this time it wasn't a demand. It was an invitation, a promise of rest. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to drown it out. In the darkness behind my lids, I saw flashes. My father's face the night he died, the long stretch of highways I'd driven without reason, the countless campsites where I'd woken alone. All of it echoing back at me. And in that swirl of memory, I realized something. The echo just want my voice or my body. It wanted the part of me that doubted I deserved to exist at all. I opened my eyes. The echo was only a few feet away now, close enough that I could see the cracks in its skin, like fine fractures in porcelain. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. And in that imperfection, I found a sliver of strength. "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. The echo blinked. The smile faltered. "You don't belong to me," I whispered, "and I don't belong to you." For the first time, its face twisted, not in anger, in confusion. The woman's lantern flared then, light spilling across the grove. The echo staggered, skin splitting further, its movements glitching, the sound of its breath stuttering out of sync. It reached for me, its hand trembling inches from my chest, and then it spoke, not in my voice, but in a dozen voices at once. Men. Women, children, all overlapping, desperate. "Don't leave me here." The plea tore through me, raw and broken. My legs screamed to step forward, to help it, to end its suffering. But deep down, I knew the truth. That wasn't suffering. That was hunger. I turned away. The woman's lantern blazed, and the grove shuddered with a sound like splitting stone. When I looked back, the echo was gone. The soil where it had stood was cracked, steaming, as if the earth itself had swallowed it whole. I collapsed to my knees, shaking, tears streaming down my face. Relief and terror tangled in my chest, impossible to separate. The woman stepped in front of me, her shadow cutting through the light. Her eyes held no triumph, only the weight of someone who had seen this too many times before. "It'll come again," she said softly. "Not here, not in this shape. But echoes always find a way." I wanted to beg her for answers, for a way to end it for good. But before I could speak, she was already walking back into the trees, her lantern bobbing until it vanished in the dark. I was alone again. When I stumbled back to the clearing hours later, the RV sat where I'd left it, quiet and still. My keys were in the dirt where I'd dropped them. The mirror inside was whole again, as if the crack had never been. But when I looked into it, my reflection smiled a half-second too late. I left before the sun came up. I didn't even bother packing properly, just shoved what I could into drawers, slammed shut the cabinets, and fired up the RV like a man fleeing a fire. My hands trembled so badly on the wheel, I nearly clipped a pine trunk pulling out of the sight. I didn't care. I just needed to get out. The road back toward the highway wound like a snake, narrow and cracked with roots. Every bend felt like it would fold back into the same stretch I'd just passed. I kept glancing at the side mirrors, half expecting to see another RV following behind me, or worse, myself running through the woods trying to catch up. But there was nothing. Just the pale dawn pushing through the trees and the dull hum of the engine. I told myself I was free. An hour later, I was still telling myself. By the time I reached the main road, the asphalt shimmered with early heat and the world felt almost normal again. I forced myself to breathe, to focus on the sound of the tires humming beneath me. It was just road noise. Just road noise. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was sitting in the passenger seat, that if I turned my head quick enough, I'd catch it leaning there, waiting, smiling. I drove all day. Didn't stop except for gas. Didn't eat. The further I got from that campground, the lighter my chest felt. But even as the miles stacked, unease gnawed at the back of my skull, the kind that doesn't fade when the scenery changes. By nightfall, I pulled into a rest area off Interstate 84. Rows of semis lined the lot, their engines idling like deep, steady breaths. I wedged my RV between them, figuring the noise and lights might drown out whatever silence tried to creep in. Inside, I killed the engine and sat in the dark, hands still glued to the wheel. My own reflection hovered faint in the windshield. I tried not to look at it, But every time my eyes drifted, I swore the reflection blinked slower than I did. Finally, I forced myself to get up, lock the door, and stretch out on the bed. Exhaustion hit me like a wave. My body ached, every muscle tight from gripping the wheel all day. Sleep should have come easy. But then I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the trucks, their engines, their air brakes sighing in the night. But layered beneath it was something else, a low hum, not mechanical, not natural. It sounded like my own voice, stretched thin and droning, vibrating through the walls. I sat up, heart pounding. The hum stopped. I told myself it was fatigue, nerves still frayed from the grove. I lay back down, pulled the blanket over my head, and forced my breathing slow. Minutes passed. The hum returned, louder this time. I held my breath, listening. It wasn't just a tone. It was words, drawn out, distorted, but words. Daniel. Daniel. I bolted upright, flicked on the cabin light. The RV glared bright and empty, every shadow retreating. My reflection in the microwave door smiled. I stumbled back, slammed my elbow against the counter. When I looked again, it was just me, staring out, wide-eyed, pale. But I'd seen it. I knew I had. I couldn't stay there. I grabbed my keys and fired the engine. The semis blurred past as I pulled back onto the interstate, tires squealing against the pavement. The farther I drove, the worse it got. Every reflective surface in the RV seemed to twitch with delay. The windows, the chrome trim, the dark screen of the TV. Once, glancing at the rear view, I saw myself still sitting at the wheel, even though my head had already turned back to the road. And the hum never stopped. Sometimes faint, like it was coming from under the floor. Sometimes so loud it rattled the cabinets. Always my name, stretched and broken, echoing. Hours bled together. Road signs blurred. I lost track of what state I was even in. All I knew was I couldn't stop. If I stopped, it would catch me. Somewhere past midnight, exhaustion betrayed me. My eyes burned, my body sagged, and for a moment I let my lids slip shut, just for a heartbeat. When they opened, I wasn't on the interstate anymore. The RV rolled slowly down a dirt track lined with pines. My hands were on the wheel, but I didn't remember turning, didn't remember an exit. The dashboard clock blinked nonsense numbers, frozen, panic surged. I slammed the brakes. Gravel sprayed. The RV skidded to a halt, headlights cutting through the trees. And there it was, the grove. Ash-colored soil, trees leaning inward, the air thick, metallic. I gasped, fumbling the shifter into reverse. The tires spun uselessly, grinding against the dirt. I slammed the accelerator, but the RV wouldn't budge. It was like the earth itself had me locked in place. The hum built to a roar, vibrating every panel, every screw. My teeth chattered with it. And then the passenger door clicked open, slowly, on its own. I didn't look. I couldn't. My vision tunneled, locked on the wheel, on the windshield, anywhere but that black, yawning doorway beside me. A voice slid into the cabin, calm, almost gentle. "You left me there." I shook my head, tears streaming. "You're not me. You're not." The voice chuckled, a sound so perfectly mine it curdled my stomach. "You can drive forever, Daniel. Campgrounds, highways, deserts, mountains. I'll be there. Because you don't run from me. You carry me." The air grew colder. My breath fogged in front of me. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles cracked. The echo leaned close enough that I felt the warmth of breath against my ear. "Sooner or later, you'll let me in." The passenger door slammed shut. The engine roared to life. The headlights flickered, and suddenly I was back on the interstate, barreling past mile markers I didn't recognize. I didn't remember steering, didn't remember merging, didn't remember anything except the echo's words curling inside me like smoke. I drove on, knowing it was with me, not outside anymore, inside, and I didn't know how to make it leave. I didn't speak for the next 100 miles. Every word that rose in my throat, I swallowed back down, afraid that if I let it out, something else might answer. The hum still pressed against the walls of the RV, but softer now, like it had settled in, like it no longer needed to prove it was there. It was patient. At a gas station just outside a nameless town, I pulled in under the floodlights. The world looked washed out, the kind of place that felt like it had never really woken up. I stepped out, filling the tank, watching the numbers climb. The night air was cool, and for a moment I convinced myself I was safe out in the open. Then I heard it. Not from inside the RV this time. Out in the lot. Daniel. My head snapped up. A man stood across the pavement near the dumpsters, just at the edge of the light. His clothes hung wrong, too loose, like borrowed fabric. His stance was stiff, unnatural. And when he spoke again, the voice was mine. "You look tired." My stomach flipped. I dropped the nozzle, gas spilling onto the concrete. I didn't care. I dove back into the RV, locked the door, and peeled out of the lot with the pump still dangling until it tore free with a sharp metallic clatter. In the rearview mirror, the man didn't move. He just stood there, still, watching me leave. By dawn, I was half delirious. My body begged for sleep, but I couldn't risk it. I kept muttering to myself little reassurances. Just keep going. Just make it to the next town. Just one more mile. The first time I heard my own voice answer back, I almost swerved into the ditch. "You won't make it to the next town." It hadn't come from my mouth. It came from inside my skull, right behind my own words, as if layered on top of them. I gripped the wheel, shaking. "You're not real. Neither are you." I screamed, raw and hoarse. My voice cracked, and then the echo's version of my scream followed half a second later, louder, fuller, drowning mine out. I punched the dashboard, pain shooting through my knuckles. The hum surged in response, filling the RV until I thought the windows would shatter. But then it stopped, all at once. Silence so thick it pressed into my ears. And in that silence, I realized something. It wasn't trying to scare me anymore. It was trying to blend. The rest of the day blurred. At one point, I pulled into a small diner on the side of the highway. Inside, the lights buzzed, the smell of grease and coffee hung heavy, and only 2 truckers sat hunched at the counter. I slid into a booth, hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the menu. When the waitress came, I forced myself to speak, just to prove I still could. "Coffee, please." She scribbled it down, nodded. Nothing unusual. My voice had sounded normal. But when she walked away, the trucker nearest the door twisted on his stool and stared at me. His eyes were wide, glassy, and his lips moved like he was repeating something under his breath. I strained to hear. He was mouthing my order. Word for word. "Coffee, please." The exact tone, the exact hesitation. I shoved out of the booth and bolted for the door, leaving my wallet on the table. I didn't eat, didn't drink. I just kept driving. By evening, exhaustion finally pinned me down. My body couldn't take it anymore. I pulled into a wooded turnout off the road, killed the engine, and slumped in the driver's seat. I told myself I'd just close my eyes for a minute. When I woke, the RV was dark. The clock read 3:12 a.m., and someone was breathing in the back. Slow, steady, even breaths. Not mine. I turned slowly, heart hammering. The bed was empty. The kitchenette, the bathroom, empty. But the breathing didn't stop. It grew louder, closer, until it was right beside me. I clenched my fists. "Show yourself." The air shifted, cold brushed against my cheek, and then my own voice whispered back, "Why would I? I'm already here." I staggered to the door, fumbling with the lock, shoving it open. Night air rushed in, cool and damp. I stumbled out, bare feet sinking into pine needles. The forest loomed around me, black trunks stretching upward into nothing. Behind me, the RV door slammed shut. The headlights flicked on, blinding, pinning me in the beam. Through the glare, I saw a figure sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, head tilted just so. Me, my knees buckled. The figure smiled, a perfect mirror of the expression I never made. The engine rumbled to life. For one sickening second, I thought it was going to drive away, leave me stranded in the woods while it took my life on the open road. Instead, the headlights flicked off. The figure melted into the dark, dissolving like smoke. The RV sat silent, empty again. I stood there in the dark for a long time, shaking, unsure if I should get back inside or just start walking until my legs gave out. Because the truth was clawing its way up through my denial, piece by piece. The echo didn't want to follow me. It wanted to be me. And I was running out of ways to tell the difference. I didn't get back inside right away. I circled the RV like it was a wounded animal, half expecting it to lunge at me if I got too close. Every window reflected a warped version of me, pale, wide-eyed, teeth clenched. But one reflection didn't move when I did. I froze. It was faint, just for a second in the side mirror, but it held longer than mine, lagging like a bad signal. I staggered back, clutching my chest. The night was heavy with silence, no crickets, no wind, nothing. Just me and that sliver of glass. I forced myself to walk up to the driver's side, knuckles brushing against the cold metal. My reflection stared back at me, jaw set. I whispered, "Say it with me, I am real." My lips moved, and the reflection moved too, but it wasn't behind anymore. It was with me, every syllable, every twitch of muscle, perfect synchronization. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass. My reflection's fog spread in the same shape, the same rhythm. I reached up, dragging a trembling finger down the mirror's surface. My reflection's finger matched. For the first time, I couldn't prove it was an echo. "What are you?" I demanded. My reflection smiled, my mouth didn't. I stumbled back, gasping. The RV door creaked open on its own like it was inviting me inside. I wanted to run, I wanted to leave everything, sprint through the woods until my legs gave out, but where would I go? My phone was dead, my mind was breaking, and whatever this thing was, it didn't seem bound to the RV anymore. It was bound to me. So I climbed back in. Inside, the air felt thinner, harder to breathe. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at my own hands on the wheel, daring them to twitch on their own. They didn't. Not yet. I drove until the trees thinned and the land opened into flat stretches of farmland. The dawn sky was smeared gray, and for the first time in days, I saw a gas station glowing like a lighthouse. I pulled in, cut the engine, and just sat there, watching people move about their lives. A woman filled her SUV while talking on her phone. A man carried a box of donuts inside. A kid kicked a soda can across the lot. Normal. I wanted to scream at them, to beg them to look at me and tell me if I still looked like myself. But I couldn't. Instead, I went into the bathroom and faced the mirror under the buzzing fluorescent lights. This time I didn't speak. I just stared. My reflection stared back, blank, patient. And then, without me moving, it whispered, "You're slipping." My knees almost gave out. I gripped the sink, eyes burning with tears. "Why me? What do you want?" It tilted its head. "You already know." I shook my head violently, spittle flying. "No, you're just exhaustion, just lack of sleep, just..." The reflection laughed. My laugh. But I hadn't opened my mouth. The sound filled the bathroom, bouncing off the tile until it sounded like a dozen voices, all mine, overlapping in a suffocating chorus. I covered my ears and bolted, shoving past the man with the donut box, ignoring the look he gave me. Back in the RV, I drove again, faster this time, as if speed could outrun it. My knuckles went white on the wheel, my eyes blurred with tears. Every mile marker blurred past. Every song on the radio warped into static. I started muttering again, desperate to keep my own voice alive. "My name is Daniel. I'm 34. I'm real. I'm real." And the echo muttered with me, perfectly, until I wasn't sure which voice was mine anymore. The sun was high overhead when I finally broke. I pulled over on a gravel road, stumbled out, and screamed into the empty fields. My voice shredded itself raw, cracking, breaking, spilling everything I had left into the air. And the echoes screamed with me, louder, stronger, until I was swallowed up by the sound of myself. When I dropped to my knees, gasping, I realized something terrifying. It wasn't delayed anymore. The echo wasn't following. It was leading. I sat in the dirt, trembling, my hands pressed to my ears. I couldn't hold on much longer. I could feel it stretching inside me, filling the cracks I'd carved open with fear and exhaustion. For the first time, I wondered if maybe it wasn't taking from me. Maybe it was giving. Maybe I wasn't losing myself. Maybe I was doubling. And that thought scared me more than anything. I staggered back into the RV, every step heavier than the last. My reflection in the window smiled without my permission. And deep down in the part of me I didn't want to admit was listening, I wondered how long before I smiled with it. The first thing I did when I got back inside was dig through the cabinet above the bed where I kept spare batteries and gear. My hands shook so badly that I dropped half the box before finding what I wanted, my old handheld recorder. It was cheap, plastic, scratched along the sides from years of being thrown into backpacks during camping trips. But it worked. At least, it used to. I slid in fresh batteries, pressed record, and set it on the counter. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 34 years old. I'm sitting in my RV, parked off a gravel road in, hell, I don't even know what county this is. I'm recording this because I don't trust mirrors. I don't trust windows. I don't trust my own voice anymore. But this should be proof. If I can play it back and it matches, I'll know I'm still me. I let the words hang in the stale air, then clicked stop. My thumb hesitated over the playback button. I pressed it anyway. At first it was fine. My voice came through, shaky but recognizable. I could almost breathe again until the end. I'll know I'm still me. A pause. Then in the same tone, the same timbre, the same me. You're not. I dropped the recorder like it had burned me. It clattered across the floor, the battery compartment popping open, batteries rolling under the couch. My chest convulsed with panic. I scrambled for them, palms sweaty, but part of me hesitated. Part of me didn't want to put the recorder back together, didn't want to hear what else it might say. But another part, the stubborn, desperate part, needed to. I snapped the batteries in, thumb trembling over record again. Tell me who you are, I said into it. Tell me what you want from me. I hit stop, played it back. At first, only silence. Then a faint crackle, like distant static. And then my voice, calm, steady, not mine, I want to stay. I froze, staring at the recorder like it was alive. My pulse thudded in my ears. Stay. It didn't say what for. It didn't say why. Just stay. I hurled the recorder into the trash bin, pressing my palms against my eyes until I saw stars. My brain screamed to leave it, to walk away, but I couldn't. I fished it back out minutes later like some addict clawing at his fix. If you stay, I whispered into it, what happens to me? The playback hissed. You fade. The words sent a cold, electric shiver racing through me. My throat tightened, my lungs clawed for air. I slammed the recorder shut, stuffed it into a drawer, and locked it with the flimsy latch. But I could still hear it, like the words had etched themselves into my skull. You fade. The drive after that was a blur. Hours bled together into endless highway, one rest stop indistinguishable from the last. Every time I looked in a mirror or window, my reflection seemed a little sharper, like it had been rehearsing while I wasn't watching. At one point, I caught myself whispering words I hadn't chosen. Just fragments. Stay, stay, stay. The sound of my own voice saying something my mind hadn't commanded left me trembling. When night fell again, I couldn't bring myself to stop at a campground. The thought of pulling into another lot with strangers' voices and laughter bleeding through thin walls filled me with dread. I didn't want anyone near me. I didn't want anyone near it. So I pulled onto a dirt turnout by a line of skeletal trees and killed the engine. The silence pressed close, heavier than before. I curled up on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The faint smell of gasoline and dust thickened my nose. My body ached for rest, but my mind refused. At some point, I drifted anyway, and I dreamed. In the dream, I was standing at the gas station bathroom mirror again. My reflection was smiling, but I wasn't. Its lips moved without sound, but I understood it anyway. You're already gone. I tried to move, but my limbs were stiff, like they weren't mine anymore. My reflection reached out, pressing its palm against the glass, and when I lifted my hand to match it, I realized it wasn't the glass between us. It was the skin of my own face. I woke with a scream, drenched in sweat, the echo of my own voice filling the RV. Except it wasn't just mine. It was layered, doubled, like a harmony I'd never asked for. I bolted upright, hands shaking, staring into the dark. My breathing was ragged, every inhale matched by another whisper of breath that wasn't mine. I whispered, "Stop." And in the silence after, something whispered back, perfectly timed, "Stop." I clutched my head, rocking in place. You're not real. You're not real. You're not. The echo cut me off. I'm more real than you. The words didn't come from the recorder this time. They came from inside my own skull, like an infection blooming in the marrow of my thoughts. I slammed my fists into the mattress, sobbing with frustration. My voice cracked. My will cracked. I could feel it moving closer, pressing against me from the inside, eager to take. And for the first time, I didn't know if I could stop it. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat at the table in the RV with the recorder propped up between a cup of cold coffee and a half-eaten granola bar, the little red light blinking. If it wanted to talk, I wanted proof. I pressed record and left it running. Hours crawled by. I tried to keep my eyes open, but exhaustion had a way of bending me under its weight. My head nodded forward once, twice. Then I was gone. When I woke, the morning light had already bled pale and weak through the blinds. My neck ached from the awkward angle, and my mouth was dry like sandpaper. The recorder sat where I'd left it, the red light still on. I reached for it with dread coiling in my stomach. I hit stop. Then play. At first, all I heard was static, the faint hum of the fridge, the whisper of my own shifting in my sleep. Nothing unusual, but then it started. My voice. Not muttered dreams or half-breaths, full sentences, hours of them. I sat frozen as the recorder poured out words I had no memory of saying, a steady stream of monologues in my tone, my cadence. I don't belong in here. I don't belong in this body. I deserve the world outside, the one in here. He's weak, he's fading, he can't hold on forever. The sound of a long pause like it was waiting for something. Then, quietly, he'll learn to let me stay. I stopped the playback, bile clawing up my throat. My body shook with nausea and fear, every hair on my arms standing on end. It wasn't just an echo anymore. It wasn't content to mimic me. It was thinking, talking, planning. And it wasn't me. I slammed the recorder off and shoved it back into the drawer, locking it again. But it didn't matter. The words were still in my ears, seared into me like burns. He'll learn to let me stay. I stumbled into the bathroom, gripping the edges of the sink until my knuckles went white. My reflection stared back, pale, hollow-eyed, lips trembling. "Say something," I whispered. It didn't move. Relief flickered. Maybe I was just unraveling. Maybe none of it was real. But then, almost imperceptibly, the corners of its mouth twitched. Not mine. Its. I slammed the light off and stumbled back, heart rattling in my chest. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like the RV had shrunk around me. I couldn't stay here. I had to move. I drove until the sun hung high, the road stretching empty in every direction. No towns, no signs, nothing but trees bending over the road like an archway. My vision blurred at the edges, exhaustion dragging at me, but fear kept me upright. When I finally pulled into another turnout, I felt a strange sense of relief, as though I'd outrun it. Left it behind in the shadows of the last place. But I knew better. I leaned back against the seat, staring out through the windshield. The forest pressed close on either side, branches scratching faintly against the RV's frame. And then I heard it. My voice, from outside. I froze, breath shallow. It came from the trees, soft, muffled, but unmistakable. "Daniel." I clamped a hand over my mouth, every muscle in my body locking. The voice called again, same tone, same timbre. "Daniel, let me in." I wanted to believe it was my mind collapsing under the weight of sleepless nights, but the sound of my own voice bleeding through the forest air left no room for rational comfort. I reached slowly for the curtain and peeked outside. The trees stood silent, still, empty. And then, from deeper in the woods came laughter. My laughter. It was wrong, drawn out, cracked, like it had been pulled through broken glass, but it was still mine. I ripped the curtain shut, pressed my back against the wall, and slid to the floor. My body shook so violently I thought I might tear myself apart. The echo wasn't just in the mirrors anymore. It wasn't trapped in the recorder. It was out there. And it wanted in. And I stayed like that until my legs cramped, whispering prayers I hadn't said in years, trying not to breathe too loud. Eventually the laughter stopped. The forest fell quiet, too quiet. I forced myself back into the driver's seat, turned the key, and floored it. Gravel spit under the tires as the RV lurched back onto the road. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed distance. But distance didn't matter. Not anymore, because somewhere inside me, beneath my frantic breathing and racing thoughts, I could hear it. Not outside, not in the recorder, but threaded through my own voice as I whispered to myself, "Keep driving. Don't stop. Don't let me out. I didn't know how long I drove. Hours bled into each other like watercolors left out in the rain, and the world outside the windshield turned into a smear of green and gray. I kept my hands locked at 10 and 2, knuckles aching, my body wound tight as a spring. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself whispering words under my breath, but I couldn't always tell if they belonged to me. Sometimes it was simple things. Left turn here. Slow down. Watch the curve. Instructions, as though I were narrating my own movements. But other times, the words carried weight. Intention. Don't go back. You're mine now. You're not safe in your own skin. I'd clamp my jaw shut, but the voice still came. Lips barely moving, sound barely audible, but there. Like someone else had leaned inside and borrowed my throat. By the time the sun dipped low again, painting the treetops gold, I couldn't keep my eyes open. I pulled into a small roadside campground, more gravel than grass, a handful of older rigs parked crooked in the lot. The place looked half abandoned, but that suited me fine. I cut the engine and sat there, listening to the tick of cooling metal, my ears straining. Nothing. Just wind in the branches. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd left it behind on the road. Maybe the distance mattered after all. But then I caught my reflection faintly in the driver's side window, my lips curled. A slow, creeping grin I hadn't given permission for. I shut my eyes tight. When I opened them again, the reflection was normal. My face, my tired, hollowed-out face. I forced myself to step outside. The air smelled of pine and dust, faint wood smoke drifting from somewhere deeper in the lot. Crickets sang, a low, buzzing chorus, grounding me more than anything else had in days. A man about my age sat by a small fire near a battered fifth-wheel trailer. He wore a ball cap pulled low, a can of cheap beer in his hand. He gave me a nod, casual like neighbors across a fence. "Evenin'," he called. I hesitated, then raised a hand. "Evening. You just passing through?" "Yeah," I said. My voice came out hoarse. "Long drive." He gestured to the fire. "Pull up a chair if you want. Lot safer out here than sitting down, cooped up in your rig." I almost declined, but the thought of sitting alone in the RV with the mirrors and the locked drawer and the silence waiting to be filled made my stomach twist. So I joined him. We sat in the crackle of the fire for a while, neither of us talking. The warmth felt good against the chill settling into the night. Finally, he said, "You look like hell. Been out on the road long?" I gave a half laugh. "Feels like forever." He nodded like he understood. "Something about these woods, man. They stretch time out, make a week feel like a season." I studied him more closely. His eyes were sharp, watchful. He didn't look drunk, despite the beer. More like he was testing me. "You ever hear strange things out here?" I asked carefully. His gaze flicked to mine. He didn't answer right away. "Yeah," he said finally. "Echoes, voices that don't belong to the mouths they come from. Happened to me once, years back. Haven't forgotten it." My heart stopped. "What did you do?" "Left," he said simply. "Didn't look back. Only reason I'm still here to drink this beer with you, far as I can tell." I leaned forward, desperate. Did it follow you?" His jaw tightened. He stared into the fire for a long moment. Then he said, "Not all of me left. Part of me's still back there. That's the price." Before I could ask more, a sound cut through the night. Laughter. My laughter. It drifted from the dark edge of the trees, tapped soft at first, then louder. Drawn out, warped. The man's head snapped up. He went pale. "You hear that too?" I whispered. He stood suddenly, tossing his beer into the dirt. "You need to go. Now." "Wait, what? Go," he barked, voice shaking. "You brought it here. It don't care about me, not tonight. It wants you." The laughter came again, closer this time, wrapping around the trees like smoke. I stumbled back toward my RV, heart battering my ribs. The man didn't follow. He just stood there by the fire, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the shadows. When I slammed the RV door shut behind me, the laughter stopped. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass of the window, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I saw him. Not the man at the fire. Me, standing at the tree line. The copy was pale, skin stretched too tight, eyes dark holes. Its smile was wide and wrong, teeth glinting in the firelight. And when it spoke, the sound rattled through the metal walls of the RV. Daniel, don't let him trick you. I'm the real one. My stomach dropped. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because in that moment, some part of me believed it. My pulse thundered so loud I thought it might shake the windows. I gripped the counter, every muscle in me coiled. The figure outside, my double, didn't move closer, didn't advance. It just stood there, that awful grin plastered across its face like someone had carved it into skin that didn't want to hold it. And its words clung to me. I'm the real one. It shouldn't have made sense, but the thought lodged deep like a splinter under a fingernail. Because how could I know for sure? I slammed the blinds shut and backed away, heart in my throat. My knees hit the edge of the bed, and I sat down hard. I tried to slow my breathing, tried to remind myself who I was. Daniel. 32. Born in Kentucky, raised in a family that couldn't afford much but always scraped by. The scar on my knee from falling out of a hayloft when I was 12. The taste of my mom's chili, thick and spicy, warming the whole house in the dead of winter. But even as I named those things, a cold doubt crawled in. What if those weren't my memories? What if they'd been placed in me, like someone stuffing cluffing clothes into a suitcase that didn't belong to them? What if the man outside the window was the one who'd actually lived them? The walls of the RV seemed to press inward. I couldn't stay still. I opened the drawer I'd locked days before, the one where I'd stuffed that mirror. My hands shook as I pulled it out, setting it on the counter. I stared. At first, nothing unusual, just me. Pale, exhausted, eyes sunken. But then the reflection twitched, lips curling into that same stretched grin I'd seen in the trees. My throat closed. The reflection spoke, though my mouth didn't move. Daniel, you've been wearing me like a mask. Don't you feel it slipping? I staggered back, almost tripping. My voice cracked. You're not real. It laughed softly. Then why are you the one afraid? The glass fogged, like breath on the other side. For one heartbeat, I thought a hand might press against it from within, but then the surface cleared, showing only my trembling face. I couldn't take it. I hurled the mirror across the RV. It shattered against the wall, pieces skittering across the floor like spilled teeth. The sound outside came instantly, another laugh, but not mine this time. Deeper, layered, as though a crowd had joined in. The man by the fire shouted something, though his words were lost in the noise. I saw him sprint for his trailer, slamming the door, plunging his campsite into darkness. The fire sputtered unattended. I was alone again. I locked every window, every door. I pulled the blinds tight, taped them down with duct tape from the drawer. Still, I couldn't keep the thought from circling back. What if I was the copy? Sleep didn't come. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening. Every creak of the RV felt like a breath. Every shift of the wind sounded like someone dragging their fingernails along the siding. When dawn came, it was sudden, as if the world had blinked and decided to spare me a few more hours. Pale light seeped through the blinds, washing everything gray. I dared to peek outside. The man's fire was ash, his chair empty. His trailer door hung open, swinging lightly in the breeze. No sign of him. My stomach turned. I didn't stick around to investigate. I turned the key, started the engine, and drove until my hands cramped around the wheel. By mid-morning, I found myself at another roadside stop. A diner, squat and faded, with a gravel lot big enough for my RV. The smell of frying bacon wafted through the door as I stepped inside, and for the first time in days, something like normalcy brushed against me. The waitress poured me coffee, her smile practiced but kind. You look beat, hon. Been driving long? Yeah, I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. My voice felt raw. Longer than I meant to. A man in a flannel shirt a few stools down looked at me over his paper. Where are you coming from? I hesitated. Campground. Out past the forest line. His brow furrowed. You mean by the ridge? Folks don't stay out there anymore. Not if they know better. My stomach tightened. Why not? He folded the paper slowly. Because sometimes you don't come back right. Look like yourself, talk like yourself. But people close to you, they swear something's off. Different laugh, different smile. Seen marriages break over it, whole families tear apart. The waitress gave him a sharp look. Don't scare the poor man, Gary. But he didn't take his eyes off me. You should leave that place behind. Burn what you got if you have to. Some things follow you if you don't. I stared into my coffee, my reflection quivering in the surface. For a second, just a flicker, it smiled without me. The mug slipped in my hands and spilled across the counter. Back in the RV, I sat behind the wheel but didn't turn the key. I kept seeing the man at the fire, his pale face as he realized what I'd dragged into his night. I kept hearing the voice in the mirror whispering about masks and slipping skin. Most of all, I kept circling back to one question. If I was the echo, if I was the thing that didn't belong, would I even know it? The silence in the RV stretched, waiting for me to answer myself. I didn't. I started the engine instead, letting the hum fill the void. And deep inside that hum, beneath the rumble of the tires on the road, I thought I heard it again. The laughter. Only this time it didn't come from outside. It came from the back of my own throat. The road unspooled before me in a blur of gray. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time had stopped behaving like it used to. The sky stretched wide, pale and empty, like even the sun had grown tired of watching me. I tried to ground myself, fingers on the wheel, breath in, breath out, highway lines flickering past like the second hand of a clock. But the longer I drove, the more it felt like I wasn't moving at all, like the world was holding me in place. Finally, I pulled over at a rest stop, one of those nameless ones with cracked pavement and trash bins half collapsed. My hands trembled as I cut the engine. The silence roared. I needed proof I was still me. I grabbed a pen from the glove box and pressed it hard against my forearm until blood rose in thin, sharp lines. Pain bloomed. Real pain. I hissed through my teeth, half relieved. But then I looked closer. The blood wasn't red. Not exactly. It shimmered faintly like oil on water. My vision swam. No, I whispered. My voice shook. That's not. The words caught, not because I couldn't finish them, but because I wasn't sure whose voice had spoken. It sounded like mine, but deeper, layered, like two throats had formed the sound. I stumbled out of the RV, gasping, desperate for air. The lot was empty except for a single sedan, doors locked, windows black. No people, no voices, just the echo of my own ragged breathing. I looked at my reflection in the RV's window, and there it was again. That grin. Too wide, too knowing. It didn't wait this time, it spoke. See it now? It murmured. You've been running from me, but you can't run from what you are. I clenched my fists. I'm real. I'm Daniel. The reflection tilted its head, pity in its eyes. Then why don't you remember the last time you slept, or the last time you ate? Why don't you remember what day it is? What year? My mind buckled. I reached for memories. Birthdays, high school football games, my mother's funeral. They came like smoke, fragile, slipping through my grasp. Real 1 second, gone the next. I dropped to my knees. That's the gravel biting into my skin. What am I? The question tore out of me like an animal in pain. The reflection's grin widened until I thought its face would split apart. You're the echo, it whispered. You've been since the night you first stepped into that forest. The real Daniel never left. The air thickened, pressing down on my chest. I wanted to fight, to deny it, to scream until the truth bent back into my favor. But deep down, I already knew. Every strange silence, every flicker in the mirror, every laugh that didn't sound right. It wasn't the world breaking. It was me. The reflection raised its hand. My body moved with it, puppet-stringed, no longer my own. And yet, in that terrifying moment, a strange calm swept through me. Maybe I wasn't real. Maybe I was nothing but the residue of a man who once lived, stretched thin across the world like a shadow at dusk. But didn't that still count for something? I rose slowly, steadying myself on the RV door. The reflection moved too, but this time I didn't flinch. I stared into its eyes, my eyes, and for the first time I didn't look away. Maybe I am the echo, I said. My voice was low, trembling but firm. But echoes last, they carry, they remind, maybe that's all I need to be. The grin faltered, just for a second, and then the glass went dark, leaving only my pale face behind. I drove again, not to escape this time, but to move forward. I didn't know where I was going, maybe back to the forest, maybe far from it. The map didn't matter. What mattered was the motion, the hum of the engine, steady, alive. Night fell, shadows stretching long across the highway. I felt the laughter stirring deep in my chest, faint and restless. But I didn't fight it. I let it sit there like a passenger I'd never chosen but had to carry. Because maybe that's what survival really is. Not outrunning the darkness, not pretending it isn't there, but learning how to live with it. The road was empty, the world quiet, and for the first time since that night by the fire, I didn't feel entirely afraid. I wasn't sure if I was Daniel or just what was left of him, but I was still here. And for now, that was enough. I've always believed that stories told around campfires carry more weight than most people want to admit. Maybe it's because when you're out there, when the only thing separating you from the vast wilderness is a thin RV wall or the ring of light thrown by a crackling fire, your mind starts to bend. Sounds travel differently. Shadows drag themselves longer. And words, just words, whispered or spoken with conviction, become something heavier, almost physical. That's where legends are born. And for me, I learned the hard way that some of the RV camping urban legends we laugh off in daylight deserve more respect than we give them. I've been on the road for years, traveling from state to state, logging miles in my RV that most people only dream about. At first, I thought of myself as just another wanderer. But the longer I traveled, the more stories I gathered. Not just my own, but ones people whispered when they thought the fire was low enough and the night was deep enough. Some of these tales were harmless, exaggerated scares to keep kids awake. But others, they dug into me, and I started to test them. Not because I wanted to prove them wrong, but because part of me, the stubborn part that refuses to let fear dictate how I live, needed to know what was fact and what was fiction. One of the first legends I heard was about a stretch of road in Nevada. RVers called it the mile marker curse. They said if you parked near marker 121, you'd hear knocking on your RV door after midnight. Sometimes it was light, tentative, like the polite knock of someone who lost their way. Sometimes it was frantic, shaking the whole vehicle, desperate to get in. But the real warning wasn't about the knocking, it was about opening the door. The story went that if you opened it, no one would be there, just empty desert, endless silence. But the next morning, something of yours would be gone. Not stolen, not misplaced, just gone. One woman claimed her wedding ring vanished after that night. Another swore the photograph of her late husband disappeared, frame and all. Now, when I first heard this, I thought, campfire scare. Easy enough. People make things up to give themselves goosebumps. But a few months later, I found myself driving through Nevada, and when my GPS pinged mile marker 121, my heart gave a jump I didn't expect. I wasn't planning to stop, but the legend whispered at the back of my mind. And against better judgment, I pulled off. I told myself it was just another campsite, just another night. That night, the desert was cold and unnervingly quiet. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. I made dinner, sat in my RV, and tried to distract myself with an old paperback. Midnight came, then 1 o'clock, nothing. I laughed it off and started drifting towards sleep. That's when the first knock came. It was so soft, I thought I'd imagined it. Then it came again. 2, 3 gentle raps right against the RV door. My blood went cold. I told myself it was just the wind. But then came a 4th knock, slow, deliberate. Not the wind. Someone was out there. I froze, staring at the door, listening to my own heartbeat. The rule of the legend burned in my brain. Don't open it. Every instinct I had screamed to check. What if it was someone in trouble? What if it was a lost traveler, stranded in the desert? But the silence between knocks told me otherwise. It wasn't human hesitation, it was something mimicking it. I stayed put. My hands dug into the blanket, knuckles white until the knocking stopped. Hours later, I drifted into a restless sleep, half certain I'd dreamt it all. But when I woke up, my grandfather's compass, the one I always kept on the dashboard, was gone. Just gone. The dash was clean, dust undisturbed, no signs of a break-in. That compass had guided me through more states than I could count, and now it was simply erased from my life. Was it coincidence? Maybe. Was it my fault for leaving it too close to the edge, letting it fall somewhere I couldn't see? I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe in coincidence. But deep down, I knew better. That legend wasn't just a tale, it was a warning. And I hadn't listened. That wasn't the only time. There's another story, one that circulates heavily among long-haul campers, the Phantom Campground in Colorado. The way it goes, there's a turnoff along a mountain road where you'll find a rustic campground not marked on any map. At first glance, it looks like any other. Stone fire rings, wooden picnic tables, even old metal signs rusted by decades of weather. But they say if you stay the night, you'll hear laughter. At first faint, then closer, like people gathering around a campfire that doesn't exist. And in the morning, the campground will be gone, leaving you parked in a bare stretch of forest with no road in sight. When I heard this, it fascinated me. I've spent my life exploring hidden spots, places forgotten by time. So, of course, when I hit Colorado, I went looking. I didn't find it the first trip or the second. But one autumn evening, while driving a back road along the Rockies, I caught sight of a dirt turnoff I'd never noticed before. Something in me knew. I pulled in. Sure enough, there it was. A clearing, half ringed by pine trees, with old picnic tables and a fire ring full of ash. It looked weathered, but real. And I thought, maybe the legend is just exaggeration. Maybe this is simply an abandoned campground no one bothered to log anymore. That night, I built a fire. The air was sharp with pine, the kind of crisp cold that sneaks into your lungs and makes you feel alive. For a while, I forgot the legend. Then, sometime after midnight, I heard it. Faint at first, soft laughter carried on the wind. My skin prickled. I turned, but the firelight showed only trees. The laughter came again, closer now. Then voices speaking too low for me to catch words. My pulse quickened. I stepped toward the sound, but the shadows stayed empty. Still, the voices grew, overlapping, rising in tone, like a group gathering around their own fire, hidden just beyond sight. That's when I noticed something chilling. The air near my fire was still, but the trees around me swayed violently, as if whipped by an invisible storm. The laughter climbed into shrieks, not of joy, but of something darker, mocking. I backed toward my RV, heart pounding, fire forgotten. The moment I shut the door behind me, the voices cut off. Silence, complete and suffocating. When dawn came, the clearing was empty. No picnic tables, no fire ring, just dirt and pine needles. The turnoff itself was gone, replaced by a thick wall of trees. And the road I had driven in on, I couldn't find it for hours. I tell you this not to scare you for the sake of scaring, but because the line between fact and fiction isn't as clear as we want to believe. I went chasing legends, thinking I'd bunk them, and instead, I found myself part of their fabric. And once you've had that experience, once you've lost something you love, once you've heard voices where there should be none, you can never fully return to disbelief. The thing about legends is that once you've brushed against them, you start to see their fingerprints everywhere. A strange noise outside your RV doesn't feel like just the wind anymore. A missing object isn't just misplaced, it's taken. And even though logic claws at you, begging you to keep your feet on the ground, there's a part of you that remembers how it felt when the knocking was real, when the laughter in the woods sounded like it wanted you to follow. That part of you whispers, don't ignore it. This is how it begins. There's another legend that follows RVers like a shadow, the highway hitcher. Almost every state has its own version of him, a lone figure spotted along rural highways. Some describe him as a man in a worn-out denim jacket, others as a woman in a pale dress. But the details that never change are these. They never speak, they always appear just as night deepens, and they always seem to be walking in the same direction you're driving. Most campers just pass them by. But the legend says if you stop, if you open your door and offer a ride, they vanish. And later that night, you'll hear footsteps pacing inside your RV. I used to laugh at that one. A ghostly hitchhiker? Too cliche. But I'll never forget the night I was cutting across Arkansas, the highway unlit, my headlights slicing through mist. That's when I saw her, a woman in white, walking the shoulder, her hair plastered to her face like she'd come up from a river. At first, my stomach tightened. Then I scolded myself. It's late. She needs help. I slowed, debating whether to stop. But something stopped me. The way she moved. Too smooth. Too steady. Like her feet weren't even touching gravel. I gripped the wheel and passed her by. My headlights brushed over her, and for the briefest moment, her head snapped toward me. I swear to you, her eyes glowed in that beam. I pushed the accelerator hard, the RV growling as if it wanted to escape as much as I did. That night, parked at a rest stop, I told myself I was fine, that I'd done the right thing. But when the clock struck 2, I woke to a sound. Slow, deliberate footfalls. Heel, toe. Heel, toe. Pacing the length of my RV, I froze under the blanket, every muscle stiff. My breath caught in my throat, my ears straining. The footsteps circled, sometimes brushing against the thin wall like fingertips dragging along metal. Then they stopped. Right outside my door, silence pressed down. I didn't sleep again that night. And when morning came, there were no prints in the dirt. None at all. Just my own from when I'd stepped out the evening before. Some people say the highway hitcher is a trick of guilt, that RVers see what they want to see when they leave someone stranded. But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. Another legend has to do with the lakes. RV camping often brings you close to them, reservoirs, state park lakes, hidden forest ponds, and with them come the whispers of what locals call the drowners. They're said to be spirits of those who never made it back to shore, forever calling campers toward the water. The stories vary. Sometimes it's a child's voice calling for help. Sometimes it's the sound of splashing when no one's swimming. But the warning is always the same. If you go to the water at night, you don't come back. When I first heard this one, I shrugged it off. But on a trip to Missouri, camped near a glassy lake tucked deep into the woods, I was reminded of it. The evening was perfect, the water still, reflecting the stars like a mirror. I set up camp, cooked dinner, and let myself enjoy the quiet. But sometime after midnight, I heard it. Splashing, not faint, not far, right at the edge of the lake. At first, I thought it was an animal, but then came a voice, high, thin, trembling. Help me. Every instinct screamed at me to rush out. Someone could be drowning. But then the rational part of me spoke up. Who would be swimming at midnight in water that cold? And why hadn't I heard them enter the lake? Still, the voice came again, weaker this time. Please. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped toward the shore, my beam cutting across the black water. Nothing. Just ripples disturbing the reflection of the moon. Then the splashing started again, this time further out, like someone treading water. My chest tightened. I raised the light higher. That's when I saw it. A face. Pale, barely breaking the surface. Eyes wide, mouth open. My heart leapt into my throat. I lunged forward, ready to dive in, when the face slipped beneath the water without a sound. I froze, my breath catching. The water stilled. Not a single bubble rose. Seconds stretched into minutes. No one surfaced. And slowly the realization crept over me. If there truly had been someone, the lake would have told me. There would have been evidence. But there was nothing. Nothing except the echo of my own fear. The rest of the night, I sat awake in my RV, every creak of the water outside sounding like footsteps slapping against shore. At dawn, I forced myself to walk back. The sand was untouched, no prints, no drag marks, just my own boot marks from the night before. That's the thing about legends. They have a way of choosing you. You might think you're the one investigating them, testing fact from fiction, but in reality, they're testing you. Seeing how far you'll go, seeing what you'll believe. And sometimes, whether you want to admit it or not, they leave something behind in you. Some scars aren't physical. They're mental. They're the way you double-check your locks at night, even when you're parked in a safe campground. They're the way your heart lurches when you hear a knock at your RV door, even when it's just a neighbor dropping by to say hello. They're the way you hesitate before looking out a window, half afraid you'll see something looking back. I thought I could handle it, that I was strong enough to chase these stories and walk away untouched. But the truth? Every legend I've come close to has taken something. My compass, my sleep, my peace of mind. And yet, part of me keeps moving forward, keeps listening for whispers in the dark, not because I want to suffer, but because I need to know. I need to peel back the veil and ask, are these just stories, or are they warnings written into the land itself? The more I travel, the more I realize it doesn't matter, because fact or fiction, the fear they plant in you feels the same. And when you're out there, in the dark, far from anyone who could hear you scream, fear is all it takes to turn a story into truth. There's a legend that RVers whisper about in hushed tones because it feels too intimate, too close to the vulnerability of life on the road. It's called the Window Watcher. The story goes that when you're camped in a remote area, some lonely desert pull-off, some forgotten clearing in the pines, you might wake to the feeling of being observed. You'll turn toward your RV's windows, the blinds drawn, and for a second you'll see the outline of a face pressed against the glass. They never knock. They never speak. They just watch. And when you finally gather the courage to yank the curtain back, there's nothing but darkness outside. The first time I heard that story, I brushed it off as paranoia. Everyone knows how silence can twist your nerves when you're far from civilization. But last winter, parked in a desolate patch of New Mexico desert, I woke with my skin crawling. It was that primal instinct, an invisible thread tugging at my mind, insisting, someone is here. I held my breath, listening. The night was so still I could hear the blood in my ears. Slowly, I turned toward the side window. The curtain shifted, just barely, like it had been brushed from the outside. And for a split second, I swore I saw the faintest contour of a nose, the curve of a forehead pressed against the glass. I froze, staring, heart hammering. Then I ripped the curtain open. Nothing. Just desert and starlight. But when I looked closer, the condensation from my own breath fogging the glass, I noticed something on the outside. A faint, greasy smear, the shape of a handprint. I didn't sleep again that night. Every shadow seemed alive, every gust of wind a whisper against thin walls. By morning, the smear was gone, as if it had never existed. But I know what I saw, and worse, I know how it felt. That legend burrowed into me, teaching me that even with locks and walls, you're never truly alone out there. And maybe that's the point. Because isolation is its own monster. It bends your sense of safety until you don't know what's real anymore. There's another story tied to isolation, the vanishing convoy. It goes like this. Sometimes RVers traveling together, a group of friends or families, set out on a route. But by the next morning, only one RV makes it through. The others vanish. No skid marks, no signs of struggle, no tracks leading away, just gone. The surviving driver usually wakes up in a different place than where they parked, their memories of the night a blur. I used to think this was just a cautionary tale about sticking together on the road. But one night in Utah, I experienced something that made me question it. I had met two other solo travelers at a gas station earlier that week, Jason and Mara, both around my age, both driving small Class Cs. We decided to caravan a stretch together for safety. That night, we pulled into a remote canyon site, the red cliffs towering above us like stone guardians. We shared a fire, laughed about the miles behind us, and promised to roll out in the morning. Sometime after midnight, I drifted off to the crackle of dying embers, but when I woke, the canyon was silent, too silent. Jason's RV was gone, Mara's too. I staggered outside, rubbing my eyes, half convinced they'd just left early. But the ground told a different story. There were no tire tracks leading out, just mine leading in. The dirt was untouched, as if no one had ever parked there at all. Panic gnawed at me. I drove out, retracing the road. Nothing. No sign of them. I even circled back to the gas station where we'd met, asking the clerk if he remembered Jason and Mara. He blinked at me like I was speaking nonsense, said I'd come through alone. For days, I questioned my own memory. Had I hallucinated the whole thing, invented companions out of loneliness? But I can still picture their faces, still hear Mara's laugh as she teased Jason for burning his marshmallow. Fiction doesn't leave imprints like that. It was only later, Hearing the legend again from a grizzled old RVer at a different campsite, that I realized what might have happened. He told me, "If you wake up alone when you know you shouldn't be, don't ask questions, just keep moving." His eyes were dead serious, and I knew better than to press. Some legends aren't there to be solved. They're there to warn you. And then there's the one that haunts me most, the silent campfire. People say that in certain forests, usually the thick, old ones where light barely touches the ground, you might stumble across a fire burning with no one around it. The flames move, crackle, even send sparks. But there's no heat. If you sit too close, you'll feel the air grow colder, not warmer. And if you listen long enough, the fire begins to whisper. I didn't believe it until I saw it with my own eyes in the Pacific Northwest. Deep in the evergreens, I was hiking back from a river when I caught the glow of orange through the trees. Relief washed over me. I thought I'd found another group of campers. I pushed through the brush and into a small clearing. And there it was, a perfect circle of fire. No wood, no stones, no campers. Just flame, standing on its own, twisting in the air like it was fed by nothing but shadow. At first, I stood there dumbfounded, my brain trying to reason it out. Maybe it was a gas leak, a trick of light, but then I realized it made no sound. The fire was silent. No crackle, no hiss, no pop. Just movement. The longer I stared, the colder I felt, the chill sinking into my bones. And then I heard it, faint at first, like a radio tune just past the station. A whisper. I couldn't make out words, but the cadence was unmistakable. A voice, low and steady, spilling from the fire. My knees nearly buckled. My instincts screamed to run, but my feet held me there like the fire had anchored me. I don't know how long I stood in that trance, but when I finally tore myself away and stumbled back to my RV, I didn't look over my shoulder once. That night, lying awake, I swore I could still hear the whisper echoing inside my head. Not words, not exactly, just the shape of speech, repeating endlessly. The next morning, I went back to the spot. There was nothing. No clearing. No fire. Just dense trees, moss dripping from their branches like curtains. I couldn't even find the path I'd taken in. Legends blur the line between the natural and the impossible. And when you've been on the road long enough, you learn that believing or not believing doesn't matter. What matters is what you do when you're standing in front of the impossible, staring at it with your own eyes. Do you step forward? Do you run? Do you tell yourself it never happened, convincing yourself my mind played tricks? Or do you accept that the road is older than we are, that it carries secrets too heavy for us to name? I've asked myself those questions 100 times, and every time I think I've found an answer, another legend rises up, wrapping itself around me, daring me to peel back another layer of fear. There's one legend I avoided for years because every time I heard it told, there was a weight in the air, like the storyteller was carrying something they shouldn't be passing along. They call it the unmarked site. It's not tied to a single state or park. It's said that in almost every region, there are campsites that don't appear on any official map. You stumble on them by accident, sometimes when you're lost, sometimes when you're just looking for a place to pull over for the night. They look ordinary, cleared spaces, fire rings, maybe even old tire ruts. But once you set up there, once you light a fire or make a meal, you've marked yourself. And the legend says you won't leave that spot the same. I never wanted to test it. I told myself I had enough real places to explore, enough marked campgrounds with histories I could trust. But one night, driving through Oregon, I missed a turnoff and found myself weaving down a narrow dirt road. The trees pressed in close, headlights barely cutting the thick darkness. Just when I thought about turning back, the road opened into a wide clearing. It was too perfect. Flat ground, stone circle, even the faint remains of charred wood. My exhaustion overruled my hesitation. I parked, set up, and told myself it was fine. But as the fire burned low, I started to notice things. The silence wasn't natural. No insects, no owls, just the sound of my own breath and the fire's crackle. And when I stepped away from the flames, the air shifted, heavy, almost pressing against my skin. I tried to sleep, but sometime past midnight, I woke to voices. Not close, not clear, but just beyond the edge of hearing. I pressed my ear to the RV wall. The voices overlapped, whispering, murmuring, like a conversation happening just outside. My hand went to the door latch before I stopped myself. Something told me, if you open that door, you won't come back inside the same. So I stayed put, staring at the ceiling, sweat slick on my palms. The voices grew louder, circling like they were testing the perimeter of my RV. Then, as suddenly as they started, they stopped. At dawn, I stepped outside. The fire ring was gone, the ground was unbroken, no sign of stone, no blackened wood, nothing, just grass damp with dew. My tire tracks were there, proof I'd parked, but everything else had been erased. I drove away shaking, my chest tight, and though I left the clearing behind, a part of me never left it. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the murmur of those voices, too faint to make out, too close to forget. Another legend that clings to the highways is called the road that moves. It's the story of travelers who swear that when they stop for the night, they wake to find themselves parked somewhere else. At first, they blame themselves. Maybe they drove while too tired. Maybe they forgot. But the deeper version of the story is darker. The road itself shifts, pulling you deeper, moving you to places you never meant to go. I always thought this was a metaphor, a way of describing how easy it is to get disoriented when you're always on the move. But last summer, I lived it. I'd been camped in the Badlands, the kind of place where the horizon feels endless and the stars look close enough to touch. I park-docked off a gravel road, cooked a meal, and went to bed. When I opened my eyes the next morning, the world outside my window was different. Gone were the canyons and spires I'd fallen asleep beside. Instead, I was hemmed in by thick, jagged rock, the road behind me swallowed by a wall of stone. My GPS blinked nonsense coordinates. My map app wouldn't even load. I drove for hours, but the road twisted endlessly, looping back on itself, familiar boulders repeating like a broken reel. By nightfall, panic chewed at me. I finally stopped, too exhausted to keep circling. That night, I dreamed of headlights stretching down an infinite freeway, my RV crawling along while shadows stood on the shoulder, watching. When I woke, the road had changed again, spitting me out at a familiar exit miles from where I'd started. I don't know what moved me, whether it was dream or legend or something the land itself decided, but ever since, I've carried the fear that when I close my eyes, I might wake somewhere I don't belong. And then there's the one that RVers tell only when the fire is low and the night is at its deepest, the legend of the empty camp chairs. The story goes that if you're camping alone and you leave a chair out by the fire, you'll wake to find more chairs set up. At first, just one or two. Then, night after night, more. You'll never see them arrive. But eventually, when the circle is full, something will take the empty chair that's been waiting for you. The first time I heard that, I laughed. Too theatrical, too staged. But 2 years ago, in the Ozarks, I learned not to laugh so easily. I was parked in a secluded hollow, fire pit burning low, one folding chair set beside it. That night, I went inside to sleep without putting it away. When I stepped out the next morning, there were two chairs, mine and another, older, rusted fabric torn, like it had been left behind years ago. I froze, staring at it. Maybe someone had wandered by and left it, but the ground was untouched, no tracks but mine. I shoved it into the trees, unnerved, and told myself it was nothing. The next morning, there were three. Mine, the rusted one I'd thrown aside, and a wooden rocker that looked hand-carved, splinters jutting from its arms. Panic scraped at me. I packed up and drove out, not daring to look back at the circle of chairs around the dying fire. But I can't forget it. I can't forget the sense that they weren't just chairs. They were placeholders. And one day, one night, they'd be waiting for me to sit down. Legends like these don't fade. They grow, attaching themselves to you like burrs on clothing. And no matter how many miles you put between yourself and the place they began, they stick. And maybe that's the truth behind it all. It isn't about proving whether the legend is fact or fiction. It's about understanding that once you've touched it, once you've brushed against the boundary between story and reality, it never lets go. I used to think fear was something you could manage with preparation. Lock your doors, keep your phone charged, trust your maps. But the more nights I've spent under strange skies, the more I realize fear doesn't come from the things you can prepare for. It comes from the things that don't fit into your plans, the things that bend the rules you've built your safety on. Fear comes from the moments when you realize your logic can't protect you. There's a legend that embodies that feeling perfectly, the one campers call the silent visitor. The story goes that sometimes after you've settled in, after the fire's burned low and the crickets have gone quiet, you'll hear footsteps circling your RV. Not hurried, not heavy. Just slow, deliberate steps, as if someone is studying the shape of your vehicle, memorizing where the windows and doors are. The footsteps never stop at the door, never knock, never try to force their way in. They just circle, all night. And when morning comes, there's no sign anyone was ever there. I didn't want to believe it. But one night in Montana, I had no choice. I was parked at the edge of a dense forest, the air sharp with the scent of pine and earth. Around 2 a.m, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching underfoot. At first I thought it was an animal, but then the pattern became clear, one step after another, evenly spaced, moving along the perimeter of my RV. I sat up, holding my breath. The steps came around the back, then along the driver's side, then paused by the window near my bed. My skin crawled. The instinct to peek was overwhelming, but I couldn't bring myself to touch the curtain. The footsteps resumed, circling again. Once, twice, over and over, like a ritual. The hours dragged, my body frozen in dread. By the time dawn broke, the footsteps stopped. I forced myself outside, half expecting to see prints in the dirt, but there was nothing. The ground was undisturbed, smooth as if the night had never happened. That's the cruelty of legends. They leave no evidence, only memory. And memory doesn't fade the way tracks in dirt do. Another story that gnaws at RVers is the screamer in the hills. It's said that if you camp too close to certain ridges in the Appalachians, you'll hear a scream tearing through the night. Sometimes it sounds like a woman, sometimes like a child, always desperate. The warning passed down with the story is simple: never go looking for the source. I thought it was just a camp scare. Until one autumn, I was boondocking in a hollow surrounded by ridges that clawed at the sky. The first night was quiet. The second night, just after midnight, I heard it, a scream, high, raw, guttural. It tore through the trees, echoing so hard it seemed to come from everywhere at once. My heart seized. I grabbed a flashlight, my mind caught between instinct and caution. What if someone was hurt? What if a hiker had fallen? The scream came again, closer. This time it wavered like a recording played through broken speakers, stretching, distorting. My hand froze on the door latch, and then I heard something worse. A third scream. But it wasn't distant. It was right outside, just beyond the thin metal of my RV wall. My blood turned to ice. I stayed still, not daring to breathe. Minutes crawled past. Silence crept back in. I never opened the door. By morning, the forest looked unchanged. But when I checked the side of my RV, the paint was streaked with something dark, as if fingers had dragged along it. I touched it. Sticky. Smelled of iron. I left that hollow fast, and I've never set foot near those ridges again. But the legend that still claws deepest at my mind is the voice that knows you. It's whispered about in hushed tones, the one story that makes even seasoned travelers fall silent. It says that sometimes when you're alone in your RV, you'll hear a voice calling your name. Not just any name, your name. And the voice doesn't come from outside, it comes from inside. I never wanted to believe in it. But one night, parked deep in the forests of Washington, I learned it wasn't just a story. It was around 3 a.m. when I stirred awake. The air was heavy, still. Then I heard it. A whisper, faint, close. Hey. My eyes snapped open. I lay frozen, ears straining. Silence followed. My mind scrambled to explain it. Dream, memory, trick of the wind. Then it came again. This time, clearer. My name. I bolted upright, my chest tight, sweat prickling my skin. The voice hadn't come from outside. It had come from the back of the RV. I forced myself to turn. heart pounding so hard it drowned everything else out. Nothing, just the dark interior. But I swear for a moment I caught the faint outline of a figure, hunched low, vanishing as my eyes tried to focus. That night stretched into eternity. Every creak of the RV, every groan of the trees felt like the breath of something waiting. By dawn, I stumbled out, pale and shaking, convinced the air still carried the echo of my name. Some stories you can laugh off, explain away, file under fiction. But once the story speaks to you, once it knows your name, there's no going back. The more I've traveled, the more I've realized these legends aren't just folklore. They're warnings carved into the culture of the road. They remind us that the wilderness doesn't belong to us, that the highways hold more than pavement and lines. They remind us that when you camp, you're never truly alone. And maybe that's why they linger. Maybe that's why, even when we tell ourselves they're fiction, we still lock our doors tighter, still glance twice at our windows, still shudder when a branch scrapes against metal. Because deep down, we know. The legends don't care if we believe in them. They only care if we're listening. There's a point on the road where you stop asking if legends are real and start asking how much of yourself you're willing to give to them. Because every time I brushed against one, it felt like it took something from me. Sleep, peace, objects I cherished, parts of my certainty that I'd never get back. And when enough is taken, fear stops being a shadow in the corner. It becomes a weight pressing on you every mile, every night, waiting for the moment you're too tired to fight. The story that broke me open was one I dismissed more than any other, the reflection that doesn't match. It's simple enough. You're parked alone, maybe brushing your teeth, maybe just washing up, when you catch your reflection in a mirror or a dark window, and it moves wrong, a half second late, or it smiles when you don't. The legend says if you ever see it clearly, if you ever lock eyes with it, you'll never look away again. I told myself it was nonsense. Mirrors play tricks. Reflections warp in curved glass. Easy to explain. Until one night in Arizona, when I was camped in the desert under a sky so wide it made me dizzy, I saw it. I'd gone to the tiny bathroom in my RV to wash up before bed. My face was haggard from days of driving, eyes bloodshot, beard rough. I splashed water on my cheeks, then looked up at the mirror. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then my reflection blinked, but I hadn't. I staggered back, gripping the counter, my breath caught. I forced myself to look again. My reflection stared back, eyes flat, unmoving. Seconds stretched like hours. Then slowly its lips curled. A smile. I tore the curtain down from the mirror and shoved it into a drawer, heart slamming in my chest. For the rest of the night, I didn't dare glance at any reflective surface, not the window glass, not the glossy screen of my phone. And even now, whenever I catch my reflection, there's a flicker of dread in me, a whisper asking, "Did it smile again? Did you miss it this time?" That was when I realized legends don't just exist outside, in forests or lakes or highways. They get inside you. They become part of how you see the world, and once they do, you can't scrub them out. There's another legend that drills that truth even deeper, the clock that stops. RVers say that sometimes in the dead of night, all the clocks inside your vehicle will freeze at the same time. Watches, phones, digital displays, and when that happens, you're no longer where you think you are. The world outside is shifted. Different. I always thought it was a poetic exaggeration for how time feels on the road, days blurring together, nights dragging on forever. But last year, camped in a canyon in Utah, I lived it. I woke at exactly 3:17 a.m. because the silence was suffocating, thicker than it should have been. I glanced at my phone, 3:17. The small digital clock on the stove, 3:17. My watch, 3:17, all frozen. I tried turning the phone off and on. Nothing. It lit, but the time didn't change. A wave of nausea hit me, sudden and overwhelming, like the air itself had tilted. I stumbled to the door, flung it open. The canyon outside wasn't the canyon I'd parked in. The walls were wrong, taller, sharper, pressing in close. The sky glowed with a dull red haze, no stars visible, and the silence. It wasn't silence anymore. It was humming, low, steady, vibrating through the ground into my bones. I staggered back inside, slammed the door, and curled in the driver's seat, whispering to myself to hold on, hold on, hold on. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I opened my eyes, the clocks were ticking again. 7:04 a.m. Outside, the canyon looked normal, bathed in pale dawn, but part of me knew I'd been somewhere else. And the worst part is, I don't know how long I was gone. It's moments like that that drive home the cruelest lesson of all. The road doesn't care about you. The wilderness doesn't care. They carry their own rules, older than maps, older than pavement, older than the machines we think give us freedom. And then there's the knocker. It's the legend that ties them all together, the one that seems to crawl out of every other story. Some say it's the root of them all. Others say it's what waits at the end of every road. The story is simple. When you're camped somewhere you shouldn't be, somewhere you were warned away from, you'll hear 3 slow knocks on your RV door. You'll feel the vibration in your chest. If you answer, you'll never come back. If you don't, it'll keep knocking night after night until something inside you breaks. I never wanted to believe in the knocker. But a month after the clock incident, I was parked on BLM land in Nevada, exhausted, half broken from restless nights. And sometime past midnight, it came. One knock. Deep, deliberate. The kind of knock you feel more than hear. My stomach clenched. I sat rigid, staring at the door, waiting. The second knock rattled the hinges. My heart lurched into my throat. Sweat poured down my back. The third knock made the walls hum. And then silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Hours crawled by. By dawn, the desert outside was empty. No prints, no sign of anyone. But ever since, I've heard faint echoes of it on the road. Sometimes when I'm parked, sometimes even when I'm driving, the sound reverberating through the frame of the RV. Impossible, inescapable. And I can't help but wonder if the knocker isn't just one legend among many. Maybe it's the one behind them all. Maybe it's the thing that waits at the heart of every whispered story, every unmarked sight, every vanishing. Maybe it's the thing that comes when you've listened too closely, when you've tested too many warnings. Maybe it's coming for me. Because once you've knocked on the door of the unknown, you have to expect it'll knock back. After that night with the knocker, I stopped pretending I could separate fact from fiction. The legends weren't just stories anymore. They had become a pattern, a map of warnings etched into the land. And every mile I drove, every night I camped, I felt like I was walking deeper into that map, closer to some center I didn't want to find. Sleep came harder. Nights blurred into each other. I started keeping lights on longer, sometimes until dawn, just to push the darkness back. But darkness doesn't care about bulbs or lanterns. It waits, and it always finds a way in. There's one last legend that pressed me to my breaking point. The door that opens by itself. RVers whisper about it rarely, as if saying it out loud makes it more likely to happen. They say that in the middle of the night, no matter how well you've locked it, no matter how sturdy the latch, your RV door will creak open. Slowly. Deliberately. And the worst part is, you won't hear anyone come in. I thought it was just the kind of nightmare story you tell when the fire's dying and everyone's looking over their shoulder. But in Wyoming, parked at the edge of a wind-beaten plateau, I heard it. I'd locked the door tight, triple-checked it like I always do. Around 2 a.m, I woke to the sound of metal scraping. My eyes snapped open. Then came the creak, the unmistakable groan of the door swinging inward. My chest seized. I grabbed the flashlight I keep beside me, flicked it on, and aimed it at the front. The door was open, just a few inches, swaying gently. Beyond it, nothing but night. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The air felt thicker than water, pressing down on me. The seconds stretched, my mind racing. Was someone inside already? Was something waiting? Then I saw it. The shadow of the door frame shifting, like something had passed through it. My flashlight beam wavered, catching only empty space. I lunged forward, slammed the door, locked it again, and shoved a chair against it. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold the latch. For the rest of the night, I sat in the driver's seat, kept flashlight clutched in a death grip, eyes on that door. By dawn, the chair was still wedged in place, the lock still clicked tight, but I know what I heard, I know what I saw. And after that, I couldn't take it anymore. I left the plateau, driving until my eyes burned, until my gas gauge hovered near empty. I didn't care where I was headed, only that I was moving. The open road stretched like a lifeline, every mile putting distance between me and whatever had pressed itself against my door. But deep down, I knew distance didn't matter anymore, because the legends weren't behind me. They were inside me. Every rest stop, every forest edge, every desert pull-off felt tainted, like the echoes of those stories were waiting, watching. A knock at the edge of sleep, a smear on the glass, a reflection out of sync. One night, desperate for rest, I pulled into a brightly lit RV park, one of the big ones, with rows of rigs, neon buzzing at the office, the smell of propane and late-night grilling thick in the air. I told myself I'd be safe here, surrounded, visible, ordinary. But ordinary doesn't erase what's already burned into you. That night, even with neighbors all around, I woke to silence. No humming of generators, no cough of late-night smokers, just a hollow stillness, like the whole park was holding its breath. I slid out of bed, crept to the window, and peeled back the curtain. Every RV was dark, every porch light was off, chairs sat empty around dead fires, and then in the row across from mine, a door creaked open. Slowly, carefully. No one stepped out, no one leaned in, just an empty door yawning into the night. My throat tightened, I backed away, heart hammering. Then I heard it. The sound I dreaded most, 3 slow knocks, not on my RV, on the one beside it. I froze, every nerve screaming. The knocks came again, shaking the thin metal of my neighbor's rig. Still, no one stirred, no light flicked on. The whole park stayed silent, like everyone else had already heard and learned not to answer. The third knock echoed like a heartbeat. And then, nothing. I don't remember lying back down, I don't remember closing my eyes. But when dawn came, the park buzzed with life again. People cooking breakfast, dogs barking, kids running between sites. And the RV that had been knocked on? Gone. No tire tracks, no trace, just an empty space in the row. That's when I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. The legends don't just happen out there in the wilderness, far from people. They can happen anywhere. They don't need isolation. They don't need darkness. All they need is you. And once they've found you, they don't let go. I left that park before noon, driving until my hands ached from gripping the wheel. My reflection in the rear view looked pale, hollow, a stranger I wasn't sure I trusted anymore. Every mile marker blurred past, each one whispering of the road's hunger, its endless appetite for stories like mine. That was the night I stopped chasing legends. That was the night I realized they were chasing me. I've spent years trying to understand why these legends cling to us, why they follow RVers like shadows across every highway. Maybe it's because the road strips us bare. When you're out there, night after night, parked in lonely places where silence is heavier than walls, you start to hear things you never noticed before. You start to see the edges of the world bend, and maybe the legends slip through those edges, taking root in us, shaping the way we see and fear. I used to think fear was weakness, something to fight, something to crush down with logic and stubbornness. I thought if I faced enough of these stories, I'd walk away, hardened, immune. But what I've learned is that fear isn't weakness at all. It's a teacher. It shows us where the boundaries are, where the ground softens under our feet. It reminds us that no matter how big our vehicles are, no matter how many locks or lights we set up, we're still small. We're still guests on a land that was never built for our comfort. The mile marker curse took my compass, but it gave me respect for the things I can't explain. The Phantom Campground swallowed a night of my life, but it taught me not to assume every clearing is meant for me. The highway hitcher showed me that not every traveler is meant to be saved. The drowners, the window watcher, the silent visitor, they all reminded me that the wilderness has eyes, and sometimes those eyes look back. And the knocker. The knocker taught me what it means to say no, to stand firm even when every muscle screams to open the door, to answer. It taught me that survival isn't about courage, It's about discipline, about listening when the stories tell you to stay still. I don't know if these legends are real in the way we think of real. I don't know if they're ghosts, tricks of the land, hallucinations born from fatigue, or echoes of trauma left by those who came before us. Maybe they're all of that at once. Maybe they're none. But I do know this. When you're out there, the line between fact and fiction doesn't matter. The fear feels the same either way. The decisions you make, the hesitation before answering a knock, the choice not to step toward the scream, the decision to ignore the whisper of your name, those are what matter. That's what keeps you alive. So when people ask me if I believe in RV camping urban legends, I don't laugh anymore. I don't tell them it's all campfire talk. I tell them this: the road is older than us. It's filled with stories that stretch farther than our engines can carry us. And whether those stories are true or not, they will shape you. Because when the night deepens, when the fire burns low, when you're lying in your RV with only a thin wall between you and the dark, the legends come alive. They breathe in the silence. They echo in the knocks and whispers. They live in the shadows you swear just moved. And if you've been there, if you've really been there, you know that fiction or not, they leave you different. You know that when you drive away, the road still hums with them. You know that when you close your eyes, you carry them with you. So the real question isn't whether the legends are fact or fiction. The real question is, the next time you hear that knock, or that scream, or that voice that knows your name, what will you do? Will you answer? Or will you remember the silence of all the stories told before yours, the lessons whispered through fire and fear, and choose to survive? Because in the end, that's what the legends want from us. Not our belief, not our explanations, just our attention, just our silence when it matters most. And if you're wise, if you've listened closely enough, you'll know what I finally learned the hard way. On the road, some doors are never meant to be opened. I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of that fire, the way it crackled like it was chewing through bone instead of dry wood, the way it seemed to hiss at me in the dark. I've spent enough nights camping in my RV to know what comfort feels like when the world outside is just shadows and silence. But that night, sitting by the flames, staring into the coals, I saw something that tore open every sense of safety I thought I had. The reflection in the fire wasn't mine. It started simply enough. I'd left Flagstaff early that morning, driving north through stretches of ponderosa pine until I hit a small, half-forgotten campground tucked off the old road near Mormon Lake. The place wasn't even marked on most maps anymore, but a guy I met at a supply store in town had mentioned it, said it was quiet, cheap, and almost always empty. That was exactly what I was looking for: silence, space, and a break from the noise of the world. I pulled into the site late in the afternoon. My RV rattled as I eased it onto the gravel pad. There were only a handful of campsites, half of them swallowed by weeds, as if the forest had been waiting years to take the place back. The picnic tables were old and splintered, the fire pits ringed with cracked stone. My site was bordered by tall pines that reached straight into the fading sky, their tops swaying slightly in the evening wind. The air smelled like resin and cold dirt. Somewhere deep in the woods, a woodpecker hammered against bark with a rhythm that echoed just a second too long, like the sound was bouncing back from something hollow. I brushed it off. I always tried to brush things off in the woods. It's the only way to keep the nerves from taking over. I spent the early evening doing what I always do: setting up, making the RV level, stacking wood by the pit, and lighting a small fire before the sun dipped completely. There's comfort in rituals like that. They anchor you. They remind you you're not just drifting in some endless dark. But the campground felt different than others I'd been to. Too quiet. Even for late summer, I expected at least another RV or tent tucked somewhere nearby, but the place was deserted. No kids riding bikes, no faint sound of radios or laughter, not even the occasional bark of a dog. just the whisper of trees moving together like an audience waiting for something to start. When the fire was burning strong, I pulled out a folding chair and sat back, letting the warmth reach my legs. The flames moved with that hypnotic, pulsing rhythm that makes you feel like you're slipping somewhere deeper than thought. I'd had a long day driving, and the glow of the coals softened the edges of my mind. That's when I noticed it, the reflection. At first, it was subtle. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, watching the flames twist and roll. My face looked back at me from the glossy black sheen of the fire's center, the way it always does when you stare too long into heat and smoke. But then the features shifted. My mouth didn't move when I moved it. My eyes blinked slower than mine. I froze. The logical part of me wanted to say it was just exhaustion, just the way firelight distorts shapes. But the longer I stared, the clearer it became. The reflection wasn't me. The face staring back was leaner, more hollow. The jaw was sharp, the skin stretched too tight, and the eyes. They weren't my eyes at all. They were darker, sunken, but focused on me with a kind of recognition that made my stomach knot. I jerked back from the flames, nearly tipping over the chair. The sound of the forest rushed in again, the night pressing closer. I told myself it was an illusion, a trick of light and fatigue, and yet my chest was tight, my hands trembling against my knees. The fire crackled like it was laughing. I stood up and walked to the edge of the site, looking into the woods. My flashlight beam cut through the trees, but the forest just absorbed the light, swallowing it in the shadows between trunks. That's when I realized something else. There were no night sounds. No crickets, no frogs, no faint rustle of animals moving through underbrush. Just silence. It was the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but full, like something is holding its breath with you. I turned back to the fire. The reflection was gone. The flames danced normally again, throwing my familiar face back at me when I leaned in. My pulse was still racing, but I tried to tell myself I'd been caught in that half-dream state that firelight creates. I'd camped enough to know your mind plays tricks on you when you're tired. Still, unease clung to me like damp air. I stayed up later than usual, stoking the fire until it was little more than glowing embers. Every time I thought about going inside the RV, a strange resistance held me back. The RV, with its thin walls and windows, suddenly felt more vulnerable than sitting outside in the open. Out here, at least I could see. When the fire finally collapsed into ash, I forced myself to pack up, douse the pit with water, and climb inside. The RV creaked as it settled, the air inside carrying the faint smell of propane and pine needles I'd tracked in. I locked the door, slid the shades shut, and sat on the bed with my head in my hands. That's when I heard it. A knock. Not on the door, not on the windows, but from outside near the fire pit. 3 sharp raps spaced evenly apart like someone hitting stone with wood. I froze, every muscle rigid, my ears strained against the silence. The knock didn't come again, but the echo of it seemed to linger in my chest, like a second heartbeat that wasn't mine. I thought about turning on the outside floodlight, but something in me recoiled at the idea of seeing what might be there. Instead, I sat perfectly still, barely breathing, staring at the closed blinds while the forest pressed closer with every second. Eventually, the exhaustion I'd been holding at bay finally pulled me under. My body slumped on the bed, and despite my fear, I drifted into a restless sleep filled with flickering firelight and hollow eyes watching me from the coals. When I woke, the morning light was pale and washed out, stretching thinly across the campground. I opened the door, stepped out onto the gravel, and immediately saw it. The fire pit. Someone had restacked the wood into a neat pyramid. I hadn't done that. And right there in the center of the ash was a single blackened handprint, pressed deep as if the fire itself had reached out and touched stone. I stood there staring at the handprint, my breath visible in the cool morning air, though it wasn't cold enough for it. The print wasn't smudged or faint like something left behind in ash. It was burned into the rock itself. The outline was sharp, the fingers long, the palm impossibly deep, as if someone had pressed with all their weight against heat that should have been unbearable. I crouched closer, touching the edge with one fingertip. The stone was cool now, but the memory of heat clung to it in my mind, and I yanked my hand back. The woods around me were still quiet, as though they were waiting for me to acknowledge what I already knew. I hadn't been alone. I wanted to pack up and leave right then, but there's something about fear that doesn't always send you running. Sometimes it roots you in place, daring you to prove to yourself that you're stronger than what you feel. I told myself I had to at least stay one more night. I'd planned for it, driven all this way, and leaving now would feel like giving in to something I didn't even understand. The day passed in a strange haze. I tried to distract myself, went for a hike on one of the overgrown trails that wound through the pines, brewed strong coffee on my small propane stove, even read for a while in a folding chair. But no matter what I did, my eyes kept drifting back to that fire pit, to the handprint etched in black against the gray stone. By late afternoon, clouds had gathered low over the trees, and the air grew heavy with the promise of rain. A chill rolled in with the wind, carrying the smell of damp soil. I built another fire, larger than the night before, as if the flames could push the darkness further back. The fire caught quickly, smoke curling up in ribbons, the wood snapping and spitting sparks. I sat close, maybe too close, staring into the flames as if daring them to trick me again. Hours passed. The light drained from the forest until it was only me, the fire, and the shadows. And then it happened again. The reflection shifted. I'd been watching so carefully, telling myself I'd see it coming this time, that I'd catch the exact moment it changed. But there was no transition. One moment it was me, hollow-eyed and tired, and the next it was that other face. The same sharp jaw, the same gaunt skin stretched thin, the same eyes that didn't blink when mine did. Only this time, the reflection smiled. Not wide, not cartoonish, but a slow, deliberate curl of the lips that made my stomach drop. I gasped and lurched backward, my chair tipping and clattering against the gravel. The fire hissed, flames sputtering as if something invisible had breathed across them. I scrambled to my feet, heart hammering, and for a second I swore I saw the figure step forward in the coals, like it was trying to push through the flames to reach me. I grabbed the hatchet I keep near the woodpile, holding it like it would make a difference. My breath came shallow and ragged, my knuckles white around the handle. The fire danced again, normal, ordinary. My face stared back at me with fear written plain across it. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the hatchet heavy in my grip, before I forced myself to sit down again. I didn't want to, but some part of me thought leaving the fire would be worse, that whatever lived in it wanted me to retreat, and I couldn't give it that. The night dragged on in fragments of sound and silence. Every time the wind shifted, I thought I heard whispers threading through the trees, words too soft to understand, but sharp enough to prickle my skin. And then came the knocking. It started faint, barely audible over the crackle of the fire. 3 taps, spaced evenly, just like the night before. This time, though, it wasn't from the fire pit. It was from the woods. Tap, tap, tap. My head snapped toward the sound, eyes straining to pierce the darkness between the trees. The knocking came again, closer, sharper, like wood against wood. Tap, tap, tap. I raised the flashlight and aimed it into the forest. The beam caught branches and bark, illuminating nothing but stillness. The sound stopped. I lowered the light. The knocking began again, this time on the opposite side of the camp. Tap, tap, tap. It circled me. Slow, patient, deliberate. I spun in place, my chest aching with panic, my throat dry. It wasn't an animal. I knew that deep down. It wasn't random. It was a rhythm, a message, a call. And then silence. The woods went utterly still, the kind of stillness that hums in your ears. I gripped the hatchet tighter, listening, waiting for the next sound. Minutes passed. Nothing. Finally, I stumbled back into the RV, slamming the door shut and locking it. The walls felt paper thin, every shadow outside pressing against them. I pulled the curtains tight, crawled onto the bed, and lay there fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. My body shook with adrenaline that had nowhere to go. And then, faintly from outside the RV window, 3 knocks. Tap, tap, tap. This time against glass. I held my breath, heart pounding so hard I thought it might shake the walls. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. The curtain was drawn, but a thin glow from the dying fire outside outlined it. A shadow moved across the fabric. Tall. Too close. I clutched the hatchet against my chest, every nerve screaming at me not to move. The shadow lingered, stretched by the flicker of flames, and then slowly it bent, lowered itself as if crouching to peer inside. I shut my eyes. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I couldn't see it, it couldn't see me. My breathing was shallow, my muscles locked, waiting for the sound of the curtain being pulled aside, but it never came. After what felt like hours, I opened my eyes. The shadow was gone. The knocks didn't come again. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me under once more. When dawn broke, I staggered outside, body aching like I'd fought something all night. The fire pit was cold, the wood scattered, and there, just beside the RV steps, pressed into the dirt, another handprint. This one was fresh, clear, not burned into stone, but stamped into soil with a depth that suggested weight. Fingers long, palm wide, nails digging furrows at the edges, like something had been bracing itself to climb inside. I didn't eat breakfast that morning. My stomach was tight, twisted up in a knot that no amount of coffee could cut through. I just kept staring at that handprint in the soil, at the depth of it, at how deliberate it looked. Something had been here. Something that didn't care if I knew it was watching. I told myself I'd leave. That was the smart thing. I could pack up the RV in 20 minutes and be back on the highway before the sun was fully overhead. But when I looked out at the road leading back through the trees, a strange dread settled in. Leaving felt wrong, like it was exactly what it wanted me to do. I don't know how to explain that feeling. It was like the whole forest had tilted, waiting, listening for the sound of my engine. And if I gave it that, if I tried to escape, I wasn't sure I'd make it out. So I stayed. The day was heavy and restless. Clouds hung low, smothering the sky in a flat gray that pressed down on the campground. The wind carried the smell of rain, metallic and damp, but no drops ever fell. The silence was worse in daylight. Without the excuse of night, it felt unnatural, like the forest itself was holding back. I tried to distract myself. I chopped wood. I cleaned the RV. I even walked the edge of the camp this spat, checking for tire tracks or footprints that might explain who or what had been here. But the ground was undisturbed, except for that single handprint. By late afternoon, I was pacing. The idea of another night gnawed at me, but leaving felt like stepping into a trap I couldn't see. The fire pit called to me, though, like it had the night before. The memory of that reflection wouldn't let me go. It wasn't curiosity. It was something deeper, something that felt like obligation or maybe inevitability. When dusk came, I gave in. I built another fire, bigger this time, feeding it until the flames leapt high, sparks drifting into the sky like lost stars. I sat close, my hatchet within arm's reach, the light throwing deep shadows across my face. The forest pressed in, every tree a silhouette against the dimming sky. I stared into the flames. For a long time, nothing happened. My reflection stared back at me, jittering in the waves of heat, my eyes bloodshot and weary. I leaned closer, the fire warming my skin, daring it to change. And then it did. The shift was instant, like a mask pulled off. My reflection thinned, hollowed, the skin drawn tight over bones. Those eyes, those dark, sunken eyes, blinked slower than mine, unaligned with my movements. And then the lips moved. At first, it was just a twitch, but then words formed, soundless at first, then faint, like whispers breaking through static. I see you. My heart slammed against my ribs. I jerked back, but the face in the fire didn't vanish. It leaned closer, its mouth stretching into that same slow, deliberate smile. I stumbled to my feet, knocking the chair over, fumbling for the hatchet. The fire roared, flames snapping higher, as if fed by something unseen. And then, clear as my own thoughts, the voice came again, only this time it wasn't from the fire. It was behind me. I see you. I spun, raising the hatchet. The forest was dark, the shadows thick. Nothing moved, nothing spoke again. My chest heaved with ragged breaths. My hand shook so violently I nearly dropped the blade. I turned back to the fire. The reflection was gone. Just me again, wide-eyed, trembling. But the voice, it had been real. It hadn't been in my head. The knocking started again. Tap, tap, tap. This time it was closer. Louder. Coming from just beyond the ring of light the fire cast. I held the hatchet tight, backing slowly toward the RV. The knock circled again, deliberate, measured, always 3, always patient. Tap, tap, tap. The fire guttered suddenly, flames collapsing into coals with a hiss as if smothered by unseen hands. The shadows surged inward. I ran. I slammed into the RV, yanking the door open and throwing myself inside, locking it with shaking hands. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. My breath filled the space, harsh and uneven, every muscle locked in terror. And then knocks on the RV itself. Not 3. Dozens, all at once, hands, fists, fingers, rapping on the walls, the roof, the windows. A storm of sound from every side, shaking the thin metal shell of the RV. I clamped my hands over my ears, crouching low, the hatchet across my knees. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else, but still I felt the vibration of those knocks in my bones. Then, silence. Instant. Absolute. I sat frozen, my ears ringing, every nerve straining. The RV creaked in the stillness. My own breath was the only sound. And then, from just outside the door, a voice. Low. Drawn out. Let me in. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. My blood turned to ice. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The voice came again, closer, sharper. Let me in. I squeezed my eyes shut, clutching the hatchet so tight my knuckles ached. The air inside the RV grew heavy, thick, like the oxygen was being drained away. My vision swam. Then 3 knocks on the door. Tap, 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 followed by a laugh. Soft, hollow, as if the fire itself had found a voice. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember how the sound stopped or when exhaustion finally won. But when I woke, the RV was silent. I stepped outside into pale morning light, the fire pit cold, the forest hushed. The handprint by the steps was still there, deeper now, as though whatever had left it was pressing harder each night. And beside it, a second handprint, smaller, thinner, not one thing watching me. Two handprints. That's what broke me. Until then, I'd been clinging to threads, illusions, explanations, the flimsy comfort of telling myself it was just my mind misfiring in the silence. But seeing that second print beside the first, smaller but pressed just as deep, that snapped something loose inside me. It wasn't one presence circling me, it was 2, watching together. I backed up until I hit the RV door, my pulse hammering so hard I felt it in my teeth. My eyes swept the tree line, but the woods were motionless. The silence pressed so thick I swore I could hear the blood moving in my veins. I should have driven out right then. I knew it. Every instinct screamed at me to put the RV in gear and never look back. But fear has a way of freezing you, of whispering that if you move too fast, you'll draw the thing closer. And deep down, I was terrified of what I'd see in the rearview mirror if I tried to leave. So I stayed through the day, pacing, jumpy at every creak of the RV, every snap of pine cones falling from the trees. I packed some things without really deciding to. My duffel with clothes, the emergency radio, extra water. But every time I touched the keys, my hands shook so badly I couldn't bring myself to start the engine. By late afternoon, the clouds had thickened again, turning the campground into a dome of shadow before the sun had even set. I didn't bother with a fire. I couldn't. The thought of staring into those flames again, of seeing those eyes, that smile, it made my skin crawl. I barricaded myself in the RV instead, locking every latch, pulling every curtain tight. But as the darkness thickened, I realized something. The fire hadn't been what invited them in. The fire was what kept them out. I knew it the moment the silence deepened outside, when I felt that pressure against the thin walls, heavier than the night before. My chest constricted with the weight of it. My breaths came shallow, uneven. And then the knocks began again. Tap, tap, tap. This time they didn't circle. They came from every side at once. The roof, the door, the windows. Not dozens like the night before. Hundreds. Thousands. A rain of knuckles and palms hammering on every surface, vibrating through the metal shell, rattling the cabinets, shaking the dishes. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound wasn't just in my ears. It was inside me, in my ribs, my skull, my teeth. The rhythm burrowed into my chest until my own heartbeat stuttered to match it. Tap, tap, tap. The air grew hot, suffocating. The smell of smoke filled the RV, though there was no fire. My eyes burned, watering, my throat closing around invisible ash. And then, cutting through it all, voices. Not just one now, two, whispering together, layered over each other like an echo that didn't line up. Let us in. I pressed myself against the door, hatchet in hand, shaking so hard my teeth clattered. Let us in. The curtains rippled though no wind moved. The walls bowed inward like something was leaning against them. Let us in. And then the most horrifying sound of all, the lock on the door clicking. I lunged forward, jamming the hatchet handle through the latch before it could turn. My chest heaved, sweat running down my back in cold rivulets. The whispers fell silent. The knocks stopped. The air went still. I didn't move. Couldn't. My body shook with adrenaline, my muscles locked in a crouch. I stayed like that for what felt like hours, until the silence pressed harder than the noise had. And then slowly, deliberately, the door handle turned again, not forced, not frantic, just testing, like someone certain I would eventually open it. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I pressed harder against the door until my arms ached, praying the flimsy hatchet handle would hold. Finally, the pressure eased. The handle stilled. The air lightened by a fraction, and then laughter. Soft. Hollow. Two voices now, woven together in a sound that scraped at the inside of my skull. I don't remember falling asleep, but sometime in the suffocating dark, exhaustion dragged me under. When I opened my eyes, dawn had broken. Pale, sickly light filtered through the cracks in the curtains. I stumbled outside, lungs desperate for fresh air, and saw the ground around the RV. Handprints, not one, not two, dozens, pressed deep into the soil, circling the RV like worshippers around an altar. Each one burned into the earth with a precision that was impossible. I couldn't stay another night. I knew that now. Whatever these things were, they weren't wearing me down for sport. They were waiting for something. A moment. A mistake. And if I gave them another night, I knew I wouldn't see another sunrise. I packed quickly, shoving everything into bags, my hands trembling so hard I dropped half of what I owned. When I climbed into the driver's seat, the key felt foreign in the ignition. The RV roared to life, louder than I'd ever heard it, breaking the silence that had held the campground for days. For a moment, I thought it worked, that the engine had shattered whatever grip the place had on me. I shifted into drive, wheels crunching over gravel, the road ahead a thin ribbon through the trees. But then, from the tree line just beyond the edge of vision came the sound. Tap, tap, tap. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles split. My foot pressed the gas. The RV lurched forward. And as I pulled onto the old road, leaving the campground behind, the whispers followed me through the trees. See you soon. The road out of the campground was narrow, rutted, bordered on both sides by dense pine. My RV shuddered as it climbed the incline, branches scraping against the roof with the screech of nails on glass. My foot pressed harder on the gas than it should have, the speedometer creeping up past where it was safe for a road this rough, but I couldn't slow down. Every bump, every sway felt like resistance, like the forest itself was trying to hold me back. My eyes flicked to the mirrors again and again, though I dreaded what I might see. Most of the time, it was only the dust plume rising behind me, curling into the air like smoke. But every so often, just for a heartbeat, I thought I saw shapes moving inside it. Long-limbed, lean, keeping pace. I gripped the wheel tighter, the leather digging into my palms, blood pounding in my ears. The old road finally spat me out onto a cracked stretch of highway, and for a moment relief surged through me. Asphalt meant distance. Asphalt meant civilization. If I just kept driving, I'd outrun whatever that place was. But then the smell hit me. At first, I thought it was just the engine overheating, the sharp tang of oil or coolant. But no, the longer I breathed, the clearer it became. Smoke, wood smoke, the same bitter, acrid stench that had filled the RV the night before when the knocks shook the walls. I glanced at the dash, no warning lights, no overheating. The smell wasn't coming from the engine, it was coming from inside. I whipped my head around, heart hammering. The cabin was empty, no fire, no embers, but the air was thick with it, curling into my nose, coating my tongue, and in the mirror, the fire. For just a second, I swore the reflection in the rear view wasn't the road behind me, but the fire pit, glowing coals, and that face. Hollow, watching, smiling. I nearly swerved off the highway. My hands jerked the wheel, tires squealing against asphalt. I slammed my palm against the mirror, angling it away so I couldn't see, my breath coming fast and ragged. It didn't matter. The knocking started again. Tap, tap, tap. But it wasn't outside anymore. It was coming from inside the RV. I choked on a sound between a sob and a scream, whipping the wheel to the shoulder, gravel spraying as the RV lurched to a stop. I killed the engine, heart racing, and sat there, listening. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the kitchenette, from the cabinets. I staggered up, yanking one open. Empty. Another. Empty. The knocking stopped. I stood there trembling, sweat dripping down my temples, hands shaking so violently I could barely close the doors again. And then, 3 knocks against the bathroom door. My stomach turned to ice. That door was only a few feet away. I hadn't heard it open. No one could have gotten inside. The knocking came again. Tap, tap, tap. I raised the hatchet, every muscle quivering, and inched toward it. My throat was dry, my breath shallow. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. I yanked it open, swinging the hatchet high. Empty. Just the tiny bathroom, the mirror above the sink cracked from some old road vibration, the faint smell of bleach. I staggered back, my body trembling so hard I could barely stand. My knees gave out, and I dropped into the booth, the hatchet slipping from my grasp. My lungs heaved, the smoke still clinging to the air, though there was no source. And then I saw it. The reflection in the bathroom mirror. I was sitting in the booth, but the mirror showed me standing in the doorway, hatchet raised, smiling. Not my smile. Not mine at all. I lunged forward, yanked the door shut, and slapped the tiny latch into place as if it could hold back glass. My chest ached with the force of my breathing. I don't remember deciding to drive again. I just remember the world blurring past outside the windshield, mile markers flicking by without sinking in. My only thought was distance. Put miles between me and that campground. Put miles between me and whatever had followed me. But the knocking never stopped. Sometimes it came from the cabinets, sometimes from the walls, sometimes soft, sometimes violent enough to rattle the dishes. Always 3. Always patient. Tap, tap, tap. By nightfall, I was miles from anywhere familiar, parked in some nameless rest stop off the highway. I couldn't drive anymore. My body was spent, my eyelids heavy, though terror buzzed under my skin like static. I sat in the booth with every light on, hatchet on the table, staring at the windows. The glass reflected my face, back at me, my tired, hollow face, until it wasn't mine anymore. The skin pulled tight, the eyes sank deep, the smile crept slow, and behind it, another face, smaller, both watching me from the glass. I don't remember screaming, but my throat was raw by morning, and outside the RV, in the gravel by the tires, more handprints. Dozens, circling again. I lost track of how many miles I put behind me after that night. Maybe 200. Maybe more. The map didn't matter anymore. The road stretched like an endless ribbon, the lines on the asphalt pulling me forward even as every instinct screamed I wasn't outrunning anything. I wasn't leaving it behind. It was inside now. Every stop I made proved it. Gas stations, lonely rest areas, even one small town I rolled through just after dawn. No matter where I parked, no matter how many lights I switched on, I'd step outside and find them. Handprints. Pressed into dirt, gravel, sometimes even asphalt, like the weight of them was too heavy for the ground not to give way. Always clustered near the doors, always waiting. I stopped eating. My stomach rejected food, twisting at even the thought. Coffee was the only thing that passed my lips, and even that sat in my gut like acid. My reflection in the RV windows grew thinner each day, my eyes darker, the hollows beneath them deeper. And that was the worst part. The reflection wasn't just following me, it was becoming me. At night, when exhaustion pinned me to the booth or the bed, I'd glance at the window and see it sitting across from me. Not in the glass this time, but in the RV itself, like it had stepped through the layer that separated us. The leaner version of me, lips curled into that slow smile, eyes fixed on mine. Silent, patient. Sometimes there were two of them, the taller one and the smaller one. The smaller face was harder to make out, blurred, unfinished, like it hadn't quite formed yet, but the eyes were always there, sharp, watching. I tried the radio one night, my hands shaking as I tuned through static, desperate to hear another human voice. At first, it was just dead air, then faint, distant stations, voices cut off mid-sentence, music warped and stretched until it sounded like screaming. I spun the dial faster, my chest aching with panic, and then 3 knocks, right against the radio itself. Tap, tap, tap. The dial froze under my hand. The static hiss deepened, warped until it became whispering. Let us in. I hurled the radio across the RV. It shattered against the floor, but the whispers didn't stop. They rose from the speakers even as the pieces scattered, the sound leaking out like smoke. I unplugged everything, radio, microwave, even the fridge, but the voice didn't need wires anymore. It had learned my name. It spoke it for the first time just before dawn when the horizon was gray and the RV was swaddled in silence. Daniel. My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone my name in weeks, not since that supply store in Flagstaff. Hearing it in that low, hollow voice was like being stripped bare, every secret pulled into the open. Daniel, let us in. I pressed my palms to my ears until they hurt, rocking in the booth, whispering no over and over until the word lost meaning. The knocking came again, this time from inside the walls. I left the RV at sunrise. Not forever. I wasn't ready to abandon it. But I had to breathe air that wasn't heavy with smoke and whispers. My legs shook as I stepped onto the gravel of the rest stop at the morning cool brushing my face. And there they were. Handprints. Not just circling the RV now, leading away from it. A trail of them, pressed deep into the dirt, winding toward the tree line beyond the lot. I followed. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd see them, finally catch them in daylight. Maybe I thought I could end it if I faced them directly. My boots crunched over gravel, then softened against pine needles as I entered the woods. The handprints led deeper, winding between trunks across fallen logs over damp earth. They never broke, never faltered, always pairs, one larger, one smaller, moving in perfect rhythm. The deeper I went, the quieter the forest became. Even in daylight, it felt like dusk. The air grew damp, thick with the scent of moss and rot. My breath fogged in front of me, though it wasn't cold. The handprints stopped at a clearing. In the center was a fire pit. Not mine, not the campground's, but identical. Same cracked stones, same ring of blackened ash, and in the coals, though no fire burned, I saw it, my reflection, smiling. Daniel, it whispered. I stumbled back, my chest seizing, my vision swimming, and in that moment, I knew. I hadn't brought them with me. They had always been here, the campground, the road, this clearing. They weren't separate places. They were one stretched thin, folding in on themselves. Wherever I went, I was still in it. The forest, the fire, the reflection. There was no leaving. I ran. Branches whipped my face, roots clawed my boots, the air burned my lungs. I crashed back through the trees, my eyes blurring with tears, the trail of handprints now leading ahead of me instead of behind. Always ahead, always just out of reach. When I broke out of the tree line, gasping for air, the RV was waiting, and in the window, 2 faces, watching me. I froze in the gravel lot, my lungs ragged, the morning light already dimming as if the sun itself was being pulled away. My legs shook beneath me, useless, my body trembling with the certainty that I was no longer outside looking in. I was the one trapped, and they were the ones free. The RV loomed like a coffin waiting open, and behind the glass, those faces lingered. My own, drawn, lean, grinning with something almost triumphant, and the smaller one beside it, features sharpening now, no longer blurred. The child's face, pale, watching. I whispered to myself, "It's not real. It's not real." My voice broke halfway through the words, thin and brittle. But the faces didn't vanish. They moved. The taller one raised its hand slowly and pressed it flat against the glass. And I swear to God, I felt the weight of it against my chest, as if the window wasn't separating us anymore. The smaller face leaned forward, lips curling open, and the knock came. From the inside. 3 steady taps against the glass, rattling it in its frame. Tap, tap, tap. I turned to run. My body wanted nothing more than to sprint down the empty highway, leave the RV behind, never look back. But I couldn't. My legs wouldn't obey. Something in me knew, if I ran, if I abandoned it, they wouldn't stay. They'd follow. They'd follow on foot, crawling out of the windows, dragging themselves over the asphalt, chasing until I collapsed. So I did the only thing left. I walked toward the RV. Every step was agony, my skin crawling, my throat locked. The closer I got, the louder the whispering grew, vibrating in the metal walls, threading through the air like heat. My name again, stretched and broken, pulled apart into a chorus. Daniel! The door handle was cold under my hand, too cold. My fingers clung to it, numb like metal in winter. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I knew opening that door was the end of everything, but I couldn't stay outside either. So I opened it. The smell hit me first, smoke. Not from any fire burning now, but old, thick, clinging smoke, the kind that seeps into fabric, into skin. The kind you can't ever wash out. It filled my lungs in one heavy swallow. Inside, the air shimmered, darker than it should have been. Shadows bent where they shouldn't bend. The booth was empty, the bed unmade, the little kitchenette stripped bare, but the reflection was still there. Not on the glass this time. Sitting in my booth. Me. The leaner, sharper me, grinning as though it had been waiting a long time for me to finally come home. Its fingers tapped the tabletop, slow, deliberate. 3 beats. Tap, tap, tap. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart battering against my ribs, sweat streaking down my temples. Then the smaller one appeared. From behind the booth seat, it rose. Child-sized, though its movements weren't like a child's. Too smooth, too practiced. Its face had finished forming now. Small, round, with dark eyes that reflected nothing. It looked at me with hunger. Not for food, but for something deeper, like it had waited for me all along. The taller one, my double, smiled wider. Sit. It wasn't a suggestion. I don't know why I obeyed. Maybe because my legs wouldn't hold me otherwise. Maybe because deep down, I knew the only way out was through. I slid into the booth across from them, the vinyl cold against my skin. My reflection leaned forward, its face inches from mine. Do you know why we followed? I shook my head, too afraid to speak. It tapped the table again. Because you're already one of us. The child climbed up onto the booth beside it, pressing close, its small hand sliding across the table toward mine. The skin of its palm left faint smears of soot. You were alone too long, my reflection whispered. You let the fire in. You looked too long into it, and it looked back. The words cracked something inside me, because I knew they were true. That night at the first campground, when I stared at the flames until shapes began to form, I'd felt something, like I'd opened a door without meaning to. And once a door is open, you don't get to choose what walks through. The child's hand reached mine. I jerked back, but the booth trapped me. The soot smeared across my knuckles, burned cold, sinking into my skin. My reflection laughed softly, shaking its head. You think you can run? You think roads matter? Campgrounds, towns, gas stations, they're all the same place. You carried us with you because we are you. I broke then. The fear turned liquid, spilling into anger, into something raw and desperate. I slammed my fists on the table, my voice cracking into a scream. Then take me and leave me alone. Stop following, stop knocking, stop watching. The child froze. My reflection tilted its head, smile faltering just slightly, like it hadn't expected defiance. The RV groaned around us, the walls shuddering, the ceiling bending inward as though the weight of the air was collapsing everything. The smoke thickened, choking me, clawing down my throat. You don't understand, it hissed. Voice low now, guttural. There is no leaving. There is no alone. There is only the fire and the reflection of the fire. And in the end, only one of us walks away. It reached across the table, its hand clamping over mine. The skin was ice, the grip impossibly strong. My bones ached under its pressure, my vision flashing white. And in that searing moment, I realized what it meant. This wasn't about being haunted. This was about being replaced. Its grip dug into my hand, bones grinding, nails biting cold into my skin. My body arched against the pressure, every instinct screaming at me to wrench free. But it was like trying to pull away from a wall of stone. The child leaned closer, its blank eyes fixed on me, its breath rattling like ash scattered across tile. The reflection's grin widened, stretching my own face into something feral, something I'd never seen in myself before. "You gave us the flame," it said. "Now we'll give you what waits on the other side." The air shuddered. The RV groaned again, metal warping as though it was collapsing under a weight I couldn't see. The windows darkened, glass liquefying into mirror. Everywhere I looked, front windshield, side panes, microwave door, my reflection was there. Not one of me, but dozens. Every angle of my face twisted, sharpened, mocking me with little smirks, little shakes of the head. My chest constricted. This was it. I was going to vanish, pulled through the glass, another face staring back at some unlucky traveler years from now. And yet, through the fear, a spark of something else caught. Anger, sharp and desperate, burned hotter than the cold grip pinning me. I slammed my forehead forward. The impact cracked against bone, the sound sharp and sickening. My reflection reeled back, stunned just enough for its grip to loosen. I tore my hand free, scraping skin against its claws, blood running hot down my wrist. The child hissed, soundless but shrill, its mouth opening impossibly wide, a cavern of darkness where teeth should have been. It lunged, but I shoved the table up with all the strength I had. The booth ripped loose from the floor with a groan of tearing screws, slamming into them both. For a heartbeat, the RV held still. Then everything erupted. The walls buckled inward, the ceiling sagged, every mirror surface rattling with the thunder of fists pounding from the other side. My face is pressed against the glass, howling without sound, eyes wide and hungry. I staggered back toward the door, lungs ripping for air. Smoke boiled thicker, choking, clinging. My vision blurred, but I forced myself forward, stumbling over torn vinyl and splintered wood. Behind me, the table crashed aside. The reflection rose, slower now, but more solid, more real. It wasn't grinning anymore. Its eyes burned with something sharp, possessive. The child clung to its leg, crawling up its side like a parasite, soot smearing everything it touched. "Don't you see?" Its voice boomed. "You can't run from yourself." I reached the door and yanked it open, but instead of daylight, I was met with blinding firelight. The world outside wasn't the gravel lot, wasn't the road, it was flames. Endless campfire flames stretching into a horizon of black. Shapes moved inside the blaze, figures half-formed, arms reaching, faces pressing from the embers. The crackling roar swallowed everything. I stumbled back, trapped. The reflection stepped closer, calm now, assured. "This is the truth. This is the place you opened. We're all here, waiting for someone to look too long, waiting for someone weak enough to believe in the silence between the flames." The child's hand reached out again, fingers coated in soot. I snapped. With a scream, I hurled myself sideways, shoving past the reflection, slamming shoulder first into the wall. The thin paneling cracked, wood splintering beneath the force. Pain ripped through me, but adrenaline carried me further. I hit again, harder. The wall gave way, exploding into shards of plywood and aluminum. And then air, cold, sharp air. I tumbled out onto gravel, the world real again. Gray morning sky, the empty lot, the whisper of wind through pine. Behind me, the RV howled. Not the engine, not any machine. The whole shell of it shrieked like a wounded animal. The door slammed shut with a thunderous clap, windows bursting outward in showers of glass. Smoke bled from the cracks, rising in twisting columns, faces still pressing against it, fading into the morning air. I crawled backward, rocks tearing my palms, eyes locked on that shuddering vehicle. The reflection appeared one last time in the shattered window, only half-formed now. Its face twisted, the grin collapsing into something almost human. Anger, desperation, grief. The child clung to it, mouth gaping in a silent scream. Then the smoke pulled them inward. The RV sagged once more, and in the span of a single blink, it stood still and lifeless, just an old camper again, empty. The silence after was unbearable. I sat in the gravel, coughing blood into my hands, staring at that beaten-up shell. For the first time, I noticed details I hadn't before. The way its paint had peeled, not just from sun, but from scorch. The faint outline of handprints burned into the metal frame. Signs that maybe I wasn't the first. Maybe I wouldn't be the last. I staggered to my feet, legs barely holding, chest on fire. The lot was silent, the forest watching, but no voices followed now. No whispers. Only the memory of the knock. Tap, tap, tap. It echoed in my head even as I stumbled toward the road. I didn't look back again. By the time I reached the highway, the sun had pushed high enough to burn away the last of the night fog. Cars passed in lazy succession, people sipping coffee from thermoses, radios humming through cracked windows. For a moment, the world felt insultingly normal, like I'd woken from a dream that had no business bleeding into daylight. I walked until my legs trembled and my throat burned. Eventually, a trucker pulled over, his rig sighing to a stop on the shoulder. He leaned out the window, a heavy-set man with kind eyes that studied me a little too long, as though he could sense the edges of something I carried but couldn't name. "You all right, buddy?" he asked. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say it was just a rough night, that my RV broke down, that I'd be fine. But the words tangled on my tongue. I simply nodded, and he let me climb in. The ride was quiet, save for the engine's low hum. My reflection stared back at me in the side mirror, pale, battered, but mine again. Just mine. I couldn't stop checking. Every few seconds I'd glance, bracing for the smirk, the delay, the whisper behind the glass. But there was nothing. Only my tired, haunted face. That should have been enough. But something lingered. The tap that had started it all, the faces pressed against smoke, the truth that places remember us more than we want them to. When the trucker dropped me off in town, I thanked him and walked until I found a diner. I must have looked like hell because the waitress didn't ask questions, just poured coffee, set a plate in front of me, and left me to it. I sat there, staring at the steam curling from the mug, watching it vanish into air like smoke escaping a fire. And I thought about what happened, about how easily I dismissed the unease, how quick I was to explain it away. That's what fear does. It doesn't just show you monsters in the dark. It tests whether you'll trust yourself when something doesn't feel right. The truth is, I should have left the moment I felt it, the wrongness in the air, the silence of the woods, the tap that didn't belong. But I didn't, because I was stubborn, because I wanted comfort more than I wanted truth, because it was easier to pretend it was nothing. And maybe that's the real horror. How often do we do that in life? Stay where it's easier, even when something inside us knows we should move. How often do we ignore the small signs only to pay for it later when they become too loud to deny? The reflection in that RV wasn't just some presence trapped in the glass. It was the part of me that refused to listen, the part that grinned while I explained things away, the part that nearly cost me my life. I don't know who burned in that RV. I don't know if the child was ever real, or if they were only shadows of someone else's mistake echoing forward in time. But I do know this. Those things wait for the ones who don't trust themselves. They wait for people like me, who look at the fire too long, who try to rationalize the silence, who stay when they should run. I walked out of that diner with the taste of burnt coffee in my mouth and a weight on my chest heavier than exhaustion. But under it all, there was also a strange clarity. If you feel the tap, listen. If the woods go silent, listen. If your reflection stares too long, listen. Because it might not be a ghost or a monster. It might just be the part of yourself you've ignored for too long, clawing its way to the surface, trying to get you to pay attention before it's too late. I'll never go back to that campground. I don't think I could drive past without seeing smoke curling from the trees, without hearing that knock follow me down the road. But I carry the memory of it, not as a curse, but as a reminder. Fear isn't always there to paralyze us. Sometimes it's the only thing in the world that's honest. Sometimes it's the only thing keeping us alive. That night taught me that campfires don't just burn outward. They burn inward too, into the places where memory and guilt and silence hide. When they burn hot enough, they show you exactly what's been waiting for you in the dark. The reflection is still with me. I see it every time I brush my teeth, every time I pass a window at night. But it doesn't mock me. It doesn't smirk. It only watches, waiting to see if I'll forget again. I don't intend to. So when you sit by your own campfire, when the flames crackle and shadows dance across the trees, remember what I've told you. Don't look too long into the fire. Don't dismiss the weight in your chest. And if you hear a knock on your RV wall when there shouldn't be one, don't wait. Trust yourself, because sometimes the campfire reflects more than your face. Sometimes it reflects the things waiting just beyond the flame. And sometimes, if you're not careful, it reflects someone else.